Ukraine uses terrain very well, much in a similar way to how they're using terrain, specifically rivers around Kherson, to their advantage. Similarly, they're also using rivers around Izium very much to their advantage as well. And I don't know if I'm the best to comment on that, but maybe Tim would be better because he used to be a star, and this is the sort of things that they think about.
But I mean, that sounds like a general collapse then, because if you can move 50 kilometers in a bunch of days, then you have to pass the first line of fortification, the second line of fortification, and the third line of fortification. So that means they're screwed, or doesn't it? I mean, is this the collapse that we have been waiting for on the Northern Front? It sounds like it.
Okay, Domen, I send you the messages via DM, and I don't know, maybe it's wrong translation. I put the Ukrainian one also, but he said like this: confirmed losses of the enemy are 30 anti-aircraft guns, 2 BMPs, 1 K-52 rotorcraft, 1 BC in Berislav. And the hour is, let me see. I need to get again on Telegram. Watch it. Maybe your Slovenian helps.
Yeah, that's 30 Russians, not 30 aircraft guns.
Yes.
It
because I saw about Pantsir also. Maybe it's the translation from Ukrainian to English.
It's the translation. It says that they have destroyed 30 Russians, 2 BMPs, 1 Ka-52 helicopter, 1 ammo depot in the Beryaslav rayon. Above that, it says w rajonie Nowej Kachowki zniszczono Czerchowy Pantsir. Yeah. Okay, so there was a Pantsir in the morning at Nowa Kachowka.
I saw the Pantsir.
Yes, but where your translation says confirmed losses of the enemy are 30 anti-aircraft guns, it just says 30 Russians, not 30 Russian anti-aircraft guns. I don't know how this translation happened. The translation's wrong.
Do know, usually is good. Usually is very, very, very good. I was baffled because 30 anti-aircraft guns is enormous. And probably
so the reason why, I will tell you why this got translated this way, right? Because it says in Ukraine. No, that's not why. No, Daniel, no, that's not why. That's a different paragraph. It says confirmed. Підтверджені втрати ворога складають 30 рашистів. Now, складають is a verb that usually that is associated with like throwing a plane out of the sky, like kicking something out of right. That's why. So because they use the verb that
they
is usually
say
associated.
Blow up, and translation was destroyed.
Exactly.
In the air.
Yes. So that's why, because that's the sort of verb that that you it's something. If you throw a stone at a bird and the bird falls out of the sky, you would use this verb.
The irony is I have elementary knowledge of Russian, but is not close to Ukrainian at all.
No, and this is one more of these myths that Russia perpetuated through the centuries, and we don't have to go into this fully. Oh, we have Andre up. Andre can confirm my note here, whether it's true or not. But I'm pretty sure that's what this refers to. Hi, Andre.
Hey, sorry, I just I think. The explanation for the skladayut word is not that. It's actually, if you say that втрати ворога складають, it means that casualties consist of. So it doesn't really say.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, so you wouldn't associate that with kicking a plane out of the sky?
No, no. The way I hear it is like, yeah, casualties consist of, and the list of, data.
Okay, well, very well then. Then that explanation is wrong. Okay, I will send you the auto translation that Daniel had and the initial image, and then you can try to figure out how the hell. Can I message you? Yes, I can. How the auto translation thought that it said 30 anti-aircraft guns then, because it makes no sense to me.
I think is probably because the algorithm of the IE is stupid and use Russian to translate Ukrainian.
Maybe that's why. But I'm sending this now to Andre, and maybe Andre can tell us how. Okay, how can I? Actually, I think I need to do this on the phone. It'll be easier. Anyway, let's go. Can I forward this? Copy photo. Yes, I can. Okay. Anyway, Eric, I'm sorry we got distracted from your question there. But I think that's about what we know. What we know of what's going on, and it's very good. It's very positive. It's very impressive, and it's. No, again, Tim maybe can comment more on that. But Andre, if you check that, if you figure out how that mistranslation happened, then that'd be great. Tim, any thoughts? Okay, no.
I'm sorry. I was speaking with Axel for a couple of minutes. Could you ask me what? Could you ask me
Oh,
again?
so Eric was asking us a few minutes ago. What's going on around Kharkiv, and then I gave him the best of my understanding of what's going on. Basically, Ukraine made massive progress, going from about 65 kilometers out of Kupiansk to barely double-digit kilometers out of Kupiansk, which is obviously very impressive in itself. But also at the same time, that will be very significant when it comes to cutting off logistics and the like. So Eric said, "Oh my, if they progressed 50 odd kilometers, that means they've broken through all the lines of defense and Russians are screwed." Is that a reasonable assessment there, Tim?
That would be a reasonable assessment. I mean, the Ukrainian forces further to the north are very much exploiting the thinned out Russian lines up there, which has been, as a result of the Russian reinforcement to the south to counter, as it turns out unsuccessfully, the Ukrainian advance around Kherson. They did thin their lines out quite substantially further to the north, and the Ukrainian forces seem to be making, real hay with it. Right? They're really exploiting this very skillfully. They're continuing to target the logistics nodes. They are continuing to target concentrations of manpower and equipment, transportation, etc., etc. There have been Russian counterattacks around Kharkov, but they appear not to have been particularly successful. Around Izium, Ukrainian forces have gained a very, very substantial amount of ground. Yes, I would say your assessment is fair. It does look like a colossal failure in the north from the Russians.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. Thank you for backing that up. Andre, have you managed to figure out how the auto translation got it so wrong?
Actually, it's very funny. I don't know how translation got so wrong, but it's wrong. Maybe it was correctly said that it was wrong AI training or something. So the word they used is rashist, and it makes me laugh because you can tell it's from the command south. Southern, Ukrainians are kind of people around Odessa, associated with like some funky sense of humor. So even though it's official military report, they still use kind of funny language, a little bit of humor. So the word rashist means like Russian fascist, and it would be like, calling Russians in a laughable way, just diminishing them. So yeah, like, and this word "rashist," which basically means like Russian fascist, it was saying that 30 of them were killed, and somehow it translated into 30 anti-aircraft, which is wrong.
Okay, good. So I got it right, but I got the wrong reasoning for it. That's good to know. Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you for jumping up and fixing us, fixing me especially.
No problem.
Daniel, any last thoughts? Okay, Daniel is
Sorry, sorry, Michael. My last thought. What I raise my hand. I want to say something very big, and don't laugh at me. I think General Zaluzhny will be so in the future even greater than Eisenhower. I know it's a big statement, but sorry, you have an army very small with Soviet tech. You get some help from Europeans, Americans, Canadians, Australians, and you beat probably the biggest army in Europe and third in the world, right? And not only you beat them so hard, they are in disarray, ready to surrender.
Let's put it this way, Daniel. They made the Russian army the third most powerful army in Ukraine now, after A, the Ukrainian army, and B, of course, the Ukrainian farmers' tractor brigades.
Don't forget, they have fleets, they have ICBMs, they have huge aviation, and they are beaten so hard that Izium area. I'm in shock.
What did I tell you yesterday, Daniel? In a few months, Russia is going to get kicked out of Ukraine by Ukraine, and then the Russian army will consist of ICBMs, strategic bombers, and not much else with the way they're losing men and material. So yeah, I mean, that's fine. It's their own fault. The only thing that I'm sorry about, literally the only thing that I'm sorry about here, is the devastation that this is causing Ukraine in the process, and the number of Ukrainians that are giving their lives and limbs for their country, and not just for their country, but for the entire Western world in the process of doing that. And this is why we are here all the time agitating to please give Ukraine more stuff to kick Russia out of their country with, because the quicker that can be done, with the better the technology, the more often, the quicker that can be done. And the quicker that can be done, the fewer Ukrainians have to suffer for it. The fewer young Ukrainians are going to lose their life and limb over it. It's going to be done regardless. The only question is how many Ukrainians have to die for it. And let's minimize that cost as much as possible
later a bit?
by sending them Bradleys and Leopards and all that other stuff that was designed in the first place for what? Beating back a Russian invasion of Europe. This is now happening. This is what they were meant for. Let's give them to them and allow them to get to the end goal, which is inevitable anyway, more quickly and more efficiently. Look at what they're doing with like a third of the stuff they should have. Look at that. Imagine what they could do with another 600 tanks and 800 IFVs. Imagine the difference.
Domen, I don't know if you put this in perspective. John Howard put it very well all the time, and I think usually I was not agree with John Howard, but now I put this in perspective. I don't want to sound scary, but we must assess this thing. is not about Russia will be defeated in Ukraine question mark. We can agree they will be defeated. I don't know when, how, and I hope faster than later. But we need to put our feet in cold water and understand this. In 1 month, the debacle in Beijing will stop. I don't know if Xi Jinping will be re-elected or not. China will not help Russia. China will not be their ally. My worry is if it's a catastrophic defeat of Russia, if it's so beaten in Ukraine, and Ukraine will win this war, we understand this at this moment. I don't know what will happen in the future, how many prisoners, how this surrender will be. But I bet Beijing will move against Russia. I will bet, and they will move faster and smarter. And I don't think Russia will get help. If you ask me 3 months ago, I will say Europeans in the United States will help Russia to not be humiliated by China. At this moment, I don't know how much of you think about this, but believe me, Chinese will never let this occasion to make what they want, their expansion. And we talk about Taiwan. People from Vladivostok must be wary. I think we need to pay attention after the October.
Oh, and this is why I say to everyone who legitimizes Russian invasion of Ukraine, but this is used to all be ruled by Russia. I tell everyone who says that then Russia should go and invade Harbin, because that used to be a part of the Russian Empire, and China should go and invade other bits of the Russian Far East, because that used to all be part of China. So hey, and Tuva used to be part of China. Don't forget that. Then what will Shoigu do? I don't think that the Chinese will take it as their defense minister after he's done this poorly in Russia. Anyway, no, you're right, Daniel, in a sense, but also at the same time, I mean, we have to not care whether Russia gets humiliated. This is such a nonsense narrative that got started off, months ago. Russia just has to get out of Ukraine one way or another, and if the only way to engender goodwill from them is to dump a lot of howitzer shells and gimlers on their heads, no. Okay, let's. I think we have time for one more caller. Let's go to Nina, and then I think it's time for a short commercial break from our sponsor, Atacam Cigarettes. Nina.
Thank you, Domen. And it was funny because when I came, my question was for a shortish update what's happened, and you just gave everything to me, Daniel, and also Andre and you, Domen. And because I already got what I wanted, and I will soon go for work, I just will say something which I thought is really funny, because we have to, when we read what was Russia or Putin or anybody in Russia says, I have to remember to always translate it to the opposite. So TASS wrote, I read it today, TASS wrote, Putin said, we haven't lost anything, and we haven't lost anything in Ukraine. So I translated it, we have lost everything, and we have lost everything in Ukraine.
Yeah, he says that, and I just think, it's what Eric said, they really are screwed. Thank you, Nina. Thank you for that bit of comedic relief. Finance. How do you read that?
I mean, right now, we read huge amounts of sales here at the Atacam's brand cigarette companies. I love that the news story that I woke up to this morning was that the reporter who was not a Berea Report reporter, could only describe what happened at the Belgrade power distribution station as going boom. which we here at the Atacams Brand Cigarette Company
Finance, look.
Thank them for
No, you need to understand. You need to understand, Finance. This is what happens at the birth of a nation. It is often difficult. It is often replete with problems because things aren't running properly yet, because things haven't started properly yet, and that's it. It often happens in the early months, such as of the emerging nation of Belgorodskaya Narodnaya Respublika. Right? It's just going to take a little while for everything to get sorted, and then there won't be any more power outages and water supply issues, anything like that anymore. They just need to keep going at it for a little bit longer. It takes a while after gaining independence to sort things out like that.
I mean, we're just really happy that the new nation of the Belgorod People's Republic, the Belgorod People's Republic, is a proud user of the Atacams Brand Cigarette Company and the Atacams Brand Cigarettes. And we just look forward to such a long-term, prosperous relationship with this new republic and great long-term sales opportunities for smoking in the Belgorod People's Republic. And we wish the fine men and women of the Belgorod Independent Partisans Group much success freeing themselves from their Russian overlords.
And let's hope they smoke inside and outside and everywhere.
We support all sorts of Russian smoking, and we would like to remind everybody that smoking kills, so please only smoke responsibly at a Russian ammo dump.
Thank you, Finance. Shaggy.
Hello again. Yeah, just a quick one on China. Yeah, China. I think China views what's going on there in one way as one giant real-life war game. So they're just gaining info on what Russia does and how what kind of prowess they have. So they've learned quite an awful lot. The other thing I'm kind of a little bit concerned about is I want Ukraine to win as quickly as possible, but I don't think Putin. It's not like an Iraq situation where if you take Saddam Hussein out, then everything else collapses, because we're not really going to be taking Putin out. So he's still going to be there. And I'm kind of a little bit worried about what possible sting in the tail, like a scorpion sting, he is likely to do. I'm not talking nuclear or chemical weapons or anything like that, but I'm more thinking of the Air Force, because they haven't really used that much.
They don't have the ability to.
Oh, they don't. So they don't. I mean, I read a report yesterday. Okay, it was on a rashist blog thingamajiggy saying they scrambled a few strategic bombers were in the air and stuff like that. But I think that was just fear mongering from them guys. But I was just wondering if it does kind of turn into a rout. So basically, if it turns into a rout, it's just game over, is it?
So I can give you a bit of a breakdown of how the Russian Air Force looks like. So they have things that they have been using, right? Which is like Su-25s and various, Su-30 whatevers. It doesn't matter. I don't know much about planes. I'll give you a Blue Peter level explanation here. So they have a bunch of planes that they have been using, which are fighters, fighter bombers, stuff like that, right? They've actually been using those over Ukraine. They keep getting shot down. That's fine. All normal. Then they have a bunch of transport planes. They don't really count in an offensive operation like this. Then they have a bunch of strategic bombers. They've been using those. They've been using those to deliver standoff weapons, basically caliber cruise missiles. And they've been launching those over the Caspian and the Black Sea. As has been noted, they're running kind of low on these standoff weapons. And what they're keeping back is basically their World War III. We really desperately need everything we possibly can to stave off America kind of stuff. Which obviously, it's just there as a strategic thing. Okay, so there's that. But then they have a bunch of dumb bombs for strategic bombers. The problem is with the dumb bombs, they need to actually fly over where they're going to drop them. And they have used them. They've used them over Mariupol. They've used them over Azovstal when the closest Ukrainian units, other than the ones in Azovstal, were 80 plus kilometers away. So they could use them. They had the freedom to operate there. But they don't have freedom to operate over Ukraine because they're going to get shot down. Period. They just are. Strategic bombers are big, unwieldy. relatively slow. Many of them are actually turboprop powered as opposed to jet engine powered, right? They're slow, big, lumbering things. There's no way that Ukrainian air defenses, if they actually go over Ukraine, there's no way Ukrainian air defenses aren't actually shooting them down. So that's good, right? That's always good to know. And then they have a bunch of planes that are completely useless in Ukraine for them, because they are they're very high altitude fighters used to chase off other countries' strategic bombers. They can't use them for anything here because Ukraine doesn't have any B2s, basically, right? If Ukraine had B2s, yeah, great. Those high altitude fighters would actually come in useful. Ukraine doesn't. Those high altitude fighters are completely useless against anything that Ukraine has. So basically, they're using what of the Air Force, and they're just talking about fixed wing here, right? Helicopters, obviously, they're using all of them already. There's no helicopters they're holding back. What they're using of their Air Force, they're already using. What they can use, they're already using. The only thing that they could still use that they haven't used are strategic bombers to deliver very large dumb bombs on Ukraine, but then they'd get shot down, and Russia knows that. That's why they haven't used them in that capacity thus far. I might be wrong, but if somebody who knows more about air forces, and specifically the Russian Air Force, wishes to tell me that, please jump up and explain to me how I'm wrong. But that's the explanation I have anyway. That the Air Force is what it is, and it's not going to change much.
Okay, thanks for that. I basically overestimated the Russian Air Force and what they had left, so thanks very much for that.
And remember, the Ukrainian air defenses are getting better by the week.
Yeah. Cheers, thank you.
That helps as well. Thank you, Shaggy. Finance.
Yeah, wanted to comment briefly on my views on China as it pertains to Russia in this war. China is not an enemy of Russia, clearly. In some fashions, they understand long-term that they are far closer culturally to Russia than they are to the West. They are both dictatorial shitholes that believe in oppressing their people, oppressing their minorities, and have absolutely no concern for the human rights of their own people, let alone anybody else. Notably, China is in the middle of committing a genocide within their own borders. So on that, they understand that long-term, they have issues with doing business outside with the West, because they are aware that there are long-term problems with how their behavior works and interacting with the world, the wealthy parts of the world that do not approve of such horrific, disgusting, vile behavior. So in that sense, they understand and are willing to work with Russia. On the other hand, they're not traditionally an ally. China has zero desire to bail Russia out. They don't want to spend their precious resources to give Russia lots of equipment so that they can win the war. Quite frankly, if Russia loses the war, if Russia breaks up, if Russia holds together, either way, China's view is to make as much money and power for China as possible. So to this end, yes, they might trade with Russia things that we would really not like them to trade with Russia. However, they're going to do everything they do with a view towards increasing their leverage over Russia and or any future decentralized or defederalized states of Russia. And they're going to, do anything with a view towards the Wall Street term here is ripping your face off, right? Taking as much money as possible from a desperate client as possible. So they view Russia as an incredibly struggling mafia company, which they basically are. They're the mafia gas station. They are having huge business problems, and China is going to extract as many concessions and cash as possible.
Siren alert
for
update.
China,
Kharkiv, all clear. This message has been generated with municipal
and that is
data.
very different than, say, what the Western world is doing as an actual ally, where we send a bunch of equipment and money and funds and things to Ukraine so they can win a fucking war. So while I would rather they tell Russia to go take a long walk off a short pier, because that would be even worse for Russia, on the other hand, what they are doing, while speaks a lot to who they are and what we're looking at and what we're talking about, also does not lend itself towards Russia, say, being able to pull off a military victory, because quite frankly, China probably is able to extract even more leverage and even more financial wins in the medium to long term if Russia loses. And I think Beijing is aware of that. So that is sort of the way I read
Air
the
siren
entire
alert
situation
update.
vis-a-vis
Kharkiv,
China
all
and
clear.
Russia.
This message has been generated with municipal data.
Completely forgetting, obviously, finances the variable that is North Korea. And North Korea is now supposed to be supplying ammunition, including for both tubed and rocket artillery to Russia, which is hilarious in its own right.
And slave labor. You forgot the actual
slave labor
deal.
Yeah. No, but that's older. That's like a month old. The ammunition is only a few days old. That's
the slave, unlike the ammunition, I actually think that North Korean slave labor works.
Air siren alert update. Kharkiv, all clear. This message has been generated with municipal data.
Let's go to Daniel, whom I'm sure has a lot of thoughts to share on this.
Okay, finance. I want to tell you why I go to that line about China and extreme orient of Russia. Agree, there are two systems, authoritarian, almost dictatorships, with concentration camps, with less respect for human lives, and China at least tried to be something different, but I follow China long before what happened now in Ukraine, long before. And past 5-10 years in China is a nationalistic movement, not similar with Russians. They claim land. America know very well the 3 dash lines and things like that, but it's not only in that area their interests expand. For them, the parts which Russia take from Japanese Empire in official discourse of Beijing, they are claimed to be ancient Chinese land. Is already for 10 years probably a big influx of people, money, and economic interest in all border with Russia. They, I can say, already colonized that area, make all the people from there dependent on Chinese mining, Chinese stuff, Chinese apparels. You'll hear about the economic interest of China in Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, all the stans, at least less in Tajikistan. But in extreme Orient, and I'm not just calling Kamchatka, all the parts north of North Korea is a clear movement, colonized movement, what you see in Africa. Russians don't tell anything about, because Moscow at that zone is very, very, very weak. And I mean weak in governor. There are probably the most free hand local authorities in all Russian Federation. And Chinese, they have a need to satisfy, a need similar with Vladimir Putin. Is about ego, is about political interest above strategic, economics, image, diplomacy. They've been framed on Xinjiang concentration camps in United Nations paper, officially. And don't think they will let a very weak Russia to be propped like a muppet and just subordinate economically. they will move very, very, very aggressive. It's not just about history of the wars in Cold War period from Chinese to Soviets. Now China is the top dog, and Russia is no more an underdog. Is a state who need help from North Korea and Iran. And Xi Jinping is not closer to Deng Xiaoping, is more close to Mao Zedong. And I can say if he get silence in China, which not have now, which he can fix the COVID problem, the economic trouble, which are great in China at this moment. But when he will get, if he will get again a new mandate at the Congress of Communist Party, and all the moves they done until now, which was not hostile against Americans. Say what you want, but past 6 months, China didn't act hostile to America, to Europe. They don't want to press our buttons, and they let the Russians fall, and they will bet we will don't make any help to Moscow, and Moscow will be for the taken. They will start with skirmish, classic Soviet-Chinese skirmishes, but if Russians protect Russian speakers in Georgia, in Ukraine, and Moldova, look how China will protect the Mandarin speakers in East Russia. Just look at it. And believe me, Chinese are not only capable, but it's very good for them to escape from the Taiwan debacle. Thank you.
So in other words, you're saying it's better for China to go and try to take bits of Russia off now that Russia's weak, rather than doing any nonsense against Taiwan. I like the thinking.
And another thing, Domen, Chinese.
There's a lot more useful stuff in Siberia than on Taiwan. That's also notable.
Yes, and Chinese are logical. They are not in the state of mind of Vladimir Putin and their establishment, political establishment from Moscow. You can say anything about Chinese. They are maniacal, nationalistic, but they are not mad. I'm pretty sure the logic prevailed there. And logic say, what do you need to fight with American Navy to get political gains and say, I made China great again, I will enter in history, when you have a very weak enemy, easy to crush like Russia. And after all, Russia made it anything to make hostile United States, European Union, and all the big allies of the 50s.
Thank you, Daniel. I wouldn't be that optimistic, but let's see what happens, because things have a tendency to happen a lot more quickly all of a sudden when a precipitatory factor occurs. I think we had Canberra, then Eric, and then Lima. Canberra.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it sounds like something we could put in the nice problems to have basket. I've only been half listening, but I think we're getting ahead of ourselves, and maybe something we should park. If anybody is a threat to Russia, I would have thought the thing they'd be looking at is separatist movements linked to some of their eastern populations. There's lots of things that could go wrong with Russia in the wake of this defeat. To be honest, I don't. I think we're getting way ahead of ourselves, thinking that China's going to start picking a scab off Russia when China's got massive problems of its own. You know, I mean, we could go on for hours about how economically fragile China is as a nation. And I think we should just park this and get on to keeping across what's actually going on right now between Ukraine and Russia. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Canberra. I agree. It's I think it is getting a bit ahead of ourselves. But would I mind it? No, not particularly. Not particularly. Eric.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting discussion, and I want to badly paraphrase an article I read some years ago about the invisible invasion or the silent invasion of China into parts of Russia, the border areas. That I mean, I think it is self-evident that the Chinese affect and I wouldn't say control, but it's part of control certain parts of Russia already in the eastern provinces, and that the process has been going on for a long time, and China nibbling off bits of a completely failing Russia post Ukraine doesn't have to take the face of a military conflict. It could be many other ways. It could be fake referendums. It could just be that border areas pledge allegiance to Beijing instead. It could be much more subtle. It can just be that, well, no one listens to Russians officials anymore. They don't have any official power. They actually listen to Beijing. And I think this is already happening, and it's been happening for the better part of 2 decades. And I can guarantee you, in a situation where Russia comes out of this greatly weakened and even sees splitting up tendencies like it did in the 90s, I think, of course, China will take advantage of that, as they already have for a long time. But again, I don't think it will necessarily end up in a war, but it will probably end up in something in between that will just show that the weakness of Russia in that part of the world and that the strength of China in the same area. So yeah, I think people are right on the money when they discuss that China will definitely take advantage if given the opportunity. How it looks, that's another question. And I'm trying to find that article because it was really interesting. They called this the invisible invasion or the silence invasion or something like that. But I can't find it. I think it was The Economist that wrote it. It was a long story about the rapidly increasing Chinese influence in certain parts of Russia. If I find it, I'll post it to you, Doman.
Thank you, Eric. Please do. Send it to Daniel as well. I think he'll appreciate that. Lima.
I just wanted to say something to the China discussions, and I felt the need to mention some things which have not been mentioned, I think are important. So I wouldn't frame China too positive because they have their own dirty little things going on, beside the usual cultural differences with the West, nested in the communist spirit living in China, as well as the trade wars going on. But there are very specific things that show that China is not that much different in terms of it is different, but it is not a safe partner. Because if you look at the genocide of the Uyghur nation, as well as the occupation of Tibet in the past or in the present as well, if you look about all the proxy conflicts that go on, Taiwan was mentioned in the last sentence of the speaker, but Taiwan is a major thing, somewhat a historic domestic thing if you want to think of the old days of China, where Taiwan was actually the capital of China. So there are dark spots in the Chinese history and in the present, and I wouldn't frame them positive. As well as their close relationships to North Korea, which is a small but somewhat of a troublemaker in the world. That's just what I wanted to add to the discussion, that people know China is not a great nation to be a partner with.
Thank you, Lima. Right, moving on from China, let's go a few clicks to the northeast, maybe. Unless, Papi, you have important notes on this. Because yesterday we were joined by Edward Morrow, a friend of the space, part of the Georgian Legion, and trying to get more supplies for the Georgian Legion and other and other parts of the Ukrainian armed forces. And he was noting how the whole North Korea thing might actually be Chinese stuff being funneled through North Korea across the Yalu River and then across the I forgot what the other river's called that borders Russia out. And I think that it'd be very interesting to see if any Chinese munitions actually made their way to Russia. What I imagine would happen instead is China would effectively be backfilling North Korean stocks of munitions, and North Korean munitions, as well manufactured as we all know they are, would be the ones making their way to the Russian ammo dumps to be hit by one of Heinen's tobacco products. Papi?
Hello, Domen. I actually came up for a different topic that we can park for a second, I guess, or for as long as it needs. Since we are speculating about China, they got the mic, I will say that while I really don't feel especially qualified to speculate, I will still make a short observation. The observation is the following. As crazy as the invasion of Ukraine is, I can possibly see the Putin lens in this. So a failing dictator cannot tolerate a neighboring country that is on a path to prosperity. That's the way I would describe it in one sentence. Well, in the case of China, attacking directly or more or less directly another nuclear power has much more downsides than upsides. And the elites in China, for all their rhetoric, they seem to me much more focused on, internal genocide rather than external genocide. To exert external force, they can use things that Russia does not possess. They can use soft power, influence, economic muscle. Russia is not in a position to do so, only has, or hoped to have good tanks, and it turns out that they're not so good. So since Daniel says that they are logical, and I see where he's coming from, it does not seem to me especially logical to me to go military when they can use other means. That's the short, complete, blind and unqualified China observation of the day for myself.
Papi, let's move off of China, and let's go ahead and introduce the other topic that you had.
All right. So one thing that I am noticing and frankly is getting my attention in the last 48 hours or so is the following. So let me back up a little bit. There are essentially two channels of information, right, from Russia. One is the channel of, let's call it, official information, which includes TASS, all the traditional media, TV propaganda, and the like. Then there is the second channel of information, which is unofficial yet pro-Russian. Military bloggers, Telegram channels, accounts, etc. So, for some time after the beginning of the large-scale invasion, those two channels, the official and unofficial, were more or less in sync. You could see some discrepancy here and there, but largely they were in sync, promoting the same narratives. In the last few days, it's really recent, I am seeing an increasing disconnect between the official Russian channels. TASS says nothing about what is going on, nor any of those various gazetas say anything about it. And on the other side, the pro-Russian but unofficial channels. So every pro-Russian military blogger and Telegram channel are basically on fire, where the most optimistic take seems to be along the lines of don't panic yet, ranges from that to much worse. So in the meanwhile, Putin is doing his choreography, military choreography with Gerasimov and Shoigu, and I am getting really strong Baghdad Bob vibes here. And I do believe, I do observe that this discrepancy seems to be widening each hour. So I am really wondering how long the Baghdad Bobs or the Moscow Bobs can afford to keep this discrepancy broadening. So one question would be for how long, and then what happens next if at some point this is not sustainable anymore with those two channels that more or less reach both segments of the Russian population diverging more and more. What happens at that point?
So somebody asked me, I think John Howard asked me this a couple of days ago. And basically what we're getting at, right, is how will Russia sell losing in Kherson, losing Kharkiv, losing everything, right? And I think it's going to go piece by piece, but I think it's basically going to go something along the following lines. Because, and I know this, or at least I have basis for this, because this is what we observed when Russia retreated from areas around Kiev and Sumy, Chernihiv. They'll say something like this. We never wanted Kherson anyway. This was just a feint. Look how many thousands of Polish tanks we destroyed in the process. And we're going on Warsaw tomorrow. I think that's roughly how they're going to respond. And also, Papi, remember, we have always been in war with East Asia.
Yeah, I do love my morning Domen's Orwell reference as much as the next guy. However, I mean, it's a little bit of a different, it's quite a different magnitude to me. While in the case of the retreat from Kiev or, some big ships becoming big submarines, they still tried to make it, have a version that was... Go ahead.
So you're asking what's the October 1917 moment? That's what you're asking. Is that right, puppies?
Yeah, that's a succinct way to put it, I guess. If you have an idea, go ahead.
I think the best way to describe... There's lots of different ways to describe and encapsulate the Russian political information environment. I often fall back on the bucket of crabs example. You've got a lot of competing ideologies that are all bound together by this idea of centralized, authoritarian corruption. And what one might observe is that the threads that bind all these crabs together are slowly fraying. And some of the bigger crabs, like the Russian imperial movement and other nationalist causes, are not necessarily very happy with the Putin crab. And so what we see, sort of from our perspective, is this discord and dissonance between what the Russian nationalist movements want to do and what the state wants them to do. And we've sort of seen this play out before in 2015, 2016 and 2017 in the occupied areas of Ukraine, and it didn't go well for the nationalists. But this is a much larger scale. The position is much different, and it's scales, just magnitudes different. Is it an October 1917 moment? I'm not sure it is, because the units that Putin would use to put these people in their places haven't been deployed to Ukraine, strangely. A discussion I was having offline with people the other day. And the reality is that Putin has spent the last 31 years revolution-proofing his regime. And so, I mean, one quibble I often have and don't often air is this conflation of Putinism, if such a thing even exists, with the various other radical ideologies he promotes to support his regime. And I think the you know, it's all fine. Everyone's friends when everybody's getting paid and the sun is shining. And the sun isn't shining anymore. So what that means is, you know, it is pure conjecture. But yeah, I think you're right. You know, it is tempting to ask that question. What is the October 1917 moment? I'm not sure we have enough information to, you know, put a pin in the map and say, right, this is, if this happens, then X will happen. Hope that's a good exploration. Well, certainly an exploration from my perspective. I don't know what you think, Hoppy or Dom, Tim, in finance.
Daniel may have a hot mic, I guess, which is a windy one.
Sometimes. No, that's Alex's side. Don't worry. That was just Alex's background noise. Okay, we have a bunch of people interested in this. Daniel, finance, smooth. Daniel, go ahead.
Me?
Yes.
Okay. Bernard Papi said something interesting. I will add Solovyov gone publicly and said the situation is very worrying, is bad, and is not happy. He made it on a radio show, which is also broadcasted on internet. His observation is very, very, very good. Yes, the official channels don't talk too much, but imagine what is in VK and Telegram at this moment when Belgorod remain without power and the veteran channel say the disaster around Izium in Kharkiv Oblast, and they know the old ladies and the grandfathers, which are exclusively connected to television, probably don't have a right idea, but they have nephews and sons. And what Alex said about the revolution, I will state two things. First, a fascist state doesn't work without powerful and respected army. So if you want to be fascist, you cannot try an Italian job because it doesn't work and everybody laugh at Mussolini. Second, nationalistic movement which are very active and criticize a lot Shoigu, and past weeks even Putin, and asking for national mobilization like Wunderwaffe of Germany Nazi in 44, 45, which in my opinion is no solution for the Russians. I think with a sleepy Vladimir Putin, who denies reality, which he paints like the special military operation is okay, they are not affected, all are good, they will attack Odessa. Make me think, and I hope Tom Zimbardo can help us a bit, make me think he's a bit disconnected from reality, not just painting a different image for the public, but a real disconnection like Adolf Hitler in Bunker.
This message has been generated with municipal data.
I don't know what I use it. After Ukraine crushed Russians around Izium and Kherson, and we will see mass surrenders continues and amplify. I think what we say about Saddam Hussein remaining in power in Iraq after first Gulf War is not an available option for Putin. Maybe nationalistic movement, which is very fragmented, is not united. They don't have a leader. There is no one with great charisma who can succeed
Kharkiv,
easy.
full alert. This message has been generated with municipal data.
And something like a coup will happen, but separatists, I just saw this night some statements from the Tatarstan Republic, which is a hot potch for past 20 years. Guys, I don't see Putin getting 2023.
I like those thoughts. Finance. Will it be smoking that kills him?
Could be Windows. Could be Windows. Let's not forget Windows. I'd like to point us all back to the great idea Lewis had, where we should just acquire a large number of Windows and ship them all to the Russian positions, because apparently Windows inside the Russian Federation proper appears to be the #1 killer of Russians, especially at the command depots. Very, very dangerous for them. So on this one, I'm going to go. There's so much smoking going on. Somehow we're not running out of cigarettes yet, but maybe we should diversify into some window shopping for the Russians. We're happy to stamp some Atacams on the windows for them. Excellent use of property there. I also want to note that Robert Goodfellow, sometimes participant on the space, major fella who appreciates all things Shiba Inu, posted a nice Atacams video, and I couldn't figure out how to post a video, and it's been like 3 days. And he said, all right, I'm posting it tonight because I'm worried that if the rate things are going, Ukraine's going to win the war before I get this video posted. So I appreciate his sentiments, but the speed at which the Ukraine armed forces is moving appears to be shocking absolutely everybody, including the Ukrainian armed forces themselves, and it's just glorious to watch.
Thank you, Fine and Smooth.
Yeah, good morning in Slava Ukraini. Taking a look at the upcoming meeting in Ramstein today, I'm still wondering what the political view is not to send Western main battle tanks to the Ukraine. I know it's always been said this would be the next phase, and we don't want to do that. But on the other side, we have NATO partner Poland sending upgraded T-72s to the Ukraine, which I think is great and should be an example for every other country. But especially with that said, what's the reason, or what's the political reason we still as the West don't send those tanks? I mean, we're sending Panzerhaubitze 2000, which I think is a system that is at least as complicated as probably a Leopard 2. So and the Ukrainians have made more than clear that they can handle such systems. So I don't really get the political reasoning behind that.
So, Smooth, I suspect strongly that it's to do with that nonsense. Oh, but it will escalate things, and then Russia will get mad at us, and they might escalate things. Which I think is a really bad set of reasoning. And you know when this reasoning was really loud, right, in the early months. Now, obviously, they don't say it anymore, but I think they're still thinking it. And I'm just really frustrated with it. And I'll tell you why I'm really frustrated with it. And I tweeted that at the Bundeskanzler a couple of days ago. He hasn't gotten back to me. I'm very disappointed. Maybe you should, Smooth, because maybe he'll answer to one of his electorate. Because 2 days ago, 3 days ago, maybe now, 4 days ago. Anyway, over the weekend, the Russian MOD put out, I don't know where the post was, maybe VK, maybe Facebook, something like that. A post in which they said they have destroyed 4 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles in Kherson Oblast. Now, to the best of all of our knowledge, no Bradleys are actually in Kherson Oblast. No Bradleys ever have been in Kherson Oblast. Right? They're basically very kind of like a tank. They're tracked. The German defense minister would definitely call them a panzer. No question about that. And notably, right, Scholz's comments were both for Western-made tanks as well as IAVs at all times. So it's an excuse for not sending MADAs. So what I suggest is saying, look, the Russians say there are Bradleys there. That's really what matters, is the Russian perception of what's there, right? The Russian Ministry of Defense publicly says there are Bradleys there. They didn't exactly escalate after that. They clearly didn't consider that a massive escalation. So let's send more Bradleys. And how about a few hundred MADAs? Because I don't think the German army ever wants to use the MADA again. It's like a 60-year-old IFV, right? But let's send those. Let's start with that. And then maybe let's send some battle tanks as well. I mean, the sooner the better. But clearly they do not see it as an escalation, because the Russian MOD said they already destroyed 4 and they barely batted an eyelid at it. That's just my thoughts on it. Let's use the Russian propaganda narrative and the logic of those who fear some mythical escalation against them appropriately and get something good for Ukraine out of it. What do you reckon, Smooth?
Yeah,
How do you like my logic?
I'm totally with you. I think it's overall cowardness. And I share your frustration 100%. And even living in Germany, I don't, screw those German politicians. We're not going to get anything from them when it comes to Ukraine. They will argue about all the money they sent and all the stuff they sent, and will probably send some blankets so the Ukrainian army won't freeze in the winter. But that's not going to win the war. I'm totally with you, and it's the one thing that also disappoints me is this one argument that Axel came up with once in a while, to say Germany will only act if there's enough pressure from the US to do so. And I think now we are in, what is it, day 196 or something like that?
197? Yeah, 197.
Okay, pretty close.
Because day 195 was the 50K day, right?
Okay.
The number, yeah.
So pretty close. I'll take that. But I think this pressure from the US towards the German government hasn't achieved anything, and I'm just sick and tired of waiting. The German government, the German politicians will not come up with anything else. I think Scholz had made this clear, and if you don't want to play, then leave the playing field and let the big boys do it. So I'm just frustrated of our politician when it comes to that. And other than that, this just makes this war go longer. And when it comes to MADA tanks, yeah, sure, the Germans don't want to use them. It's just bullshit. There's no technical or military reason behind that not to send them. I'm absolutely convinced with that, and I don't see any argument to get me away from that. It's just political, and I just hope that the direction of the wind in Germany doesn't change that much. We hear about Nord Stream 2 from the extreme left and right now, and I think it's going to be a hot rest of the year when it comes to politics and the overall perception in Germany. And I'm worried. I'm worried about what the next 4 months or so will bring, and how the perception hopefully will not change. But other than that, I'm totally with you, Dom.
Axel, North German supporting fires.
There's a rumor going around various people I know, they're not sure about it quite yet, but there may be a migration or transformation in change of posture of the American government as to the delivery of heavy weapons during Ramstein today. Let's see what happens after. I wouldn't be surprised to see significant volumes of APCs and IFVs being released by the US from pre-positioned stock in order to kill off the Russian narratives and support the Ukrainians in their magnificent offensive. I don't think that the Germans have 4 months to play. I think Mr. Scholz will be called out by the US government for lack of support simply by action, because he has said that nobody is delivering main battle tanks, and we are closely coordinating. Germany can only deliver anti-air and artillery. Well, it can and it can't, as we all know. And it seems that the Americans have called the bluff. And rather than having Mr. Scholz run into significant issues as to the real underlying data of cum-ex, give him a blemish on his soul in a different way. Because everybody in the US is quite annoyed with the speeches Mr. Scholz has been giving in recent days. I think it's the first time since the 2+4 negotiations that the German government has opposed the wishes of the United States. And during the 2+4 negotiations, that was called in quickly, thanks to the British government making it very, very clear, and the Americans therefore taking our German friends by the side. And the same is happening just now. I'm very much looking forward to the outcome of Ramstein today. I think we will be surprised. We will be surprised.
Yeah, hopefully. I just hope that the Brits and the Americans don't leave the Germans off the hook. That's I think that's pretty significant. And just the last story, and Doman, we talking about the martyrs. I think Axel knows this story very well. There was a story in recent history that the German martyrs had so much technical problems that they were sent into maneuvers or into training using broomsticks as cannons, because the cannons won't work or they wouldn't be available. So they just for the photos,
for
they put some broomsticks in there.
Yeah, for lack of maintenance funding.
Yeah, sorry for my French, but that's a fucking disgrace, you know. It's unbelievable.
Canberra.
Yeah, well, I heard Daniel say something about fascist regimes can't survive when their militaries fail. I think the shorthand of what he said. So there are two types, or there are a number of types of authoritarian regimes, but they can be broadly divided into two types. One is an expansionist empire-building type with a highly successful military, and the leader's reputation is built on the military success. The other type of focused regime, where the strongest enforcement institution is actually the secret police, and those regimes denude their external institution that can overturn their power. And that's the category that Russia falls into. So, for example, Shoigu being the head of the military, despite having no military experience, is an example of where they have tried to install essentially a flunky who is beholden to Putin to ensure that the military can't develop any leader that can threaten his power. And essentially what you're seeing unfold in Ukraine is the impact of that internally focused authoritarian regime. And in fact, this has been the way that Russia and the USSR has consistently maintained central authority over, more than 100 years.
Air siren alert
for
update.
example, Stalin,
Kharkiv, all
prior
clear.
to World
This
War II,
message has been
shot
generated
most
with
of his
municipal
generals,
data.
in the lead up to the war, because he was afraid that they were plotting against him. And ultimately they did win in World War II despite those actions. And so in terms of, how will Putin and his successor regime, because I do believe it's his successor regime that will survive, how will they survive? Well, it will actually be very similar to Saddam Hussein after the first Gulf War, which was a very similar regime where he kept the military weak, and that's why they lost so badly. And all of their resources of the state were pointed inwards. And you can imagine that the same thing will occur. Now,
Air siren alert
maybe
update.
Putin will
Kharkiv,
only be in
all
power
clear.
for another few years.
This message has been
before
generated with
something
municipal
happens to
data.
him. If something happens to him and it's a premature death, he's not going to be overthrown by the military. The only likely group that will overthrow him is essentially his Praetorian Guard. So, and the thing I guess to look out for would be some sort of incredibly bloody feud between the FSB and the GUR, because that would be a sign of internal dissension. But you're not going to see a general take over. You're going to see, if anything, it's going to be one of these senior Secret Service people or somebody from the internal political movement that's been loyal to him, who's probably far nuttier than he is. Thanks.
Air siren alert update.
Or
Kharkiv,
indeed, as
all
many have
clear.
noted before,
This message has
Balkanization,
been generated with municipal data.
That's the other way it might go. Florian, go ahead.
Good morning. I just wanted to voice a short idea, or not idea. No. Can you hear me? I think there was a call incoming.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I heard that you broke up, but you're back and fully audible.
Yes. I think Germany, or especially Mr. Scholz and his party, is acting this way because the left is very Russia-friendly and it's just politics. And also, I believe the Social Democrats still believe in this old-fashioned industrial economic model based on fossil fuels, large corporations, unions, and everything. And they desperately want to keep that economic model. And they believe that this needs cheap energy inputs such as Russian gas. And then together with the German inflexibility to think about new things, it takes ages to get around to a changed situation. That's why they're so stubborn. And there's no other reason for that. There's no military reasons. There's no factual reason. All the other arguments, like the others are not delivering tanks, are just faulty reasons. The real reason is Mr. Scholz will lose his power because the left of his party will walk away. And most of his party still cannot get around that there's a totally new economy coming. Also because of climate change, not even because of this war. And that's why the German SPD is acting the way it's acting, is my view. Maybe Axel has a comment on it.
Yeah, I've walked people through with various degrees of density and detail already on this matter. Dorman, can you summarize? Because I'm trying to lock in two things at the moment. I apologize. But Florian, we either have to park it or Dorman summarizes what I've been saying in the past. So I need to step out now. I apologize.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say very few words and pass it off to Smooth, who's like actually from North Germany there. But basically, Florian, I think you've nailed it, at least in part. Yes, there is a long history of Russia friendliness. It's not just about that; it's also about the specific people who are in charge, headed that for a very long time. Including the Chancellor, and especially the Chancellor. There are long-standing, there was back in the 60s and 70s a strong relationship between certain members of other parties, which are now of another party, which is now in government, and the Stasi and the KGB. You can guess which one that is. On top of the SPD. However, it's also a part of German consensus politics since, the 1960s, 1970s, when the first gas pipelines from the Soviet Union to Germany were opened, right? And that's very much a part of consensus politics that includes also large chunks of the CDU. Right? It isn't just about the left, it's also about Germany more broadly, ignoring its genuine allies to the east of Germany in favor of a country even farther east for a very long time. So I mean, this goes well beyond one party or one government or a subset. It's a lot more pervasive still. We had Matthias on at some point, who used to work for a lobbying firm in Berlin, and he walked us through how much funding came into various lobbying firms by state and parastate actors from, including Russia, very heavily including Russia, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, in that sort of time period, while both Schröder and then Merkel were chancellors. So it's very pervasive. It runs very deep, and it definitely runs very deep among those currently running the main party in government, but not just the main party in government. Smooth, is there any major details that we should touch upon here?
No, not really. I think it's very well said, especially what Florian said, and also you, Doman. I think there's just 2 points. Olaf Scholz is just the face of the Social Democrat Party, and he might be the primus inter pares when it comes to that, but he's not the ruler, and I think there's maybe something for the international audience here. In Germany, there is no independence from the chancellor towards the rest of the ruling party. So he's very much depending on on other guys in his party, and something in this situation where, for example, an American president, wherever he comes from, might just make a decision that he feels is right, isn't something that can happen in Germany, because he won't have the backing from his party just to do so. And that's very true in Germany. And Florian, the main handler in the background, I'm still convinced on that, is the I say in German, Fraktionsvorsitzender Rolf Mützenich. He is very much left. He is very much in the peace movement, and he's the puppet master in the background. And if Scholz doesn't get along with him, Mützenich is the one who's really going to throw stones in his direction, and therefore, yes, it's Scholz. He's the chancellor. He's the public person, but it's the overall Social Democratic Party, and very much he is depending on the left and their Russian-friendly politics.
Thank you, Smith. Yeah, it's...
No, I agree. But one last remark, very, very shortly. And it's a shame. The Social Democrats are the only ones who opposed Hitler, the only ones who opposed fascism at the time. And now they're acting in this way. I think it's totally shameful. Sorry.
Oh, absolutely, and it's the refusal to recognize Russia for what it is. It is the persistent assumption that Russia is a normal country that has persisted over the past few decades, which it's not, which it hasn't been. Right? That's the other part of the equation here, and I think a large part of the current hesitance and reticence is that it's very difficult to kind of say, oh, we were wrong every day for the last several decades. Everything we worked at, every assumption we made was wrong. It is, I think for any human, it's very difficult to say that, right? It's very difficult to say, I was wrong, not just I was wrong about one thing, I was wrong about everything to do with, Ostpolitik. for the last 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, basically my whole adult life. I was wrong about every single thing I thought about Ostpolitik. That is difficult, and I think that is part of the reason why it is moving so slow, because it's very difficult to have the degree of intellectual honesty and self-confidence to be able to do so. So even if they might recognize it now on the rational level, it's still very difficult to do it emotionally. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit, but I'm nice to people sometimes.
But Doman, can I just make one last point? Because we are focusing correctly on the Social Democrats right now, but one has to see the bigger picture that every German.
I said that from the start, right? Consensus politics.
I just want to make one example. If you look at the German military going into foreign countries or supporting the UN and whatsoever. Every government from the left and the right has been reluctant and to do so. So this goes for all parties. And the what happened then is that the governments always failed the German military with support and equipment to do their job when they sent them out to any missions. And I think this is something that you see the political discussions right now. And I know Mr. Merz from the Christian Union is a very loud speaker, but his party didn't do a good job to the German military either. So the reluctance, the political reluctance, can always be seen in the way the German military was not properly equipped handling going into foreign missions.
Yeah, and that's a part of the dismantling of the Bundeswehr since the mid-1990s, right? Before that, the German Bundeswehr was the largest land army in Europe after the Americans. Is that right? Okay, and the Soviets, obviously, right? The largest land army in Europe and NATO, other than the Americans, and it's been completely dismantled. Right? It was a massive tank force, obviously set up for one thing, and all of those tanks, or most of those tanks, are now somewhere in storage, never to be used again. Those Leo 1s, especially. Never to be used again. So let's please send those, because there's no reason not to send those ones. Whatever complaints there are about Leo 2s, whatever. Just put that aside for a second. And I'd much rather, Ukraine be fully kitted out with every Leo 2A6 and 2A7 on the planet. But let's just at the very least, let's send the Leo 1s that nobody wants to use anymore anyway. Just send those, and let's see what they can do with those, because it would make a whole lot of a difference to people currently using T-64s, because Leo 1s are much better than T-64s and the baseline T-72s, definitely much better. Why not at least give them the stuff that the German army will never want to use again? That, as the very least, that's a baseline argument that I think is very difficult for anyone to sensibly argue against, except for when literally schultzing around. Daniel, you've been waiting. Thank you so much for being very patient.
No problem. I can move from Germany back to Canberra.
You can move back to Canberra if you'd like. I think that's a pretty long flight. I don't know if we have time to wait for you for 38 hours.
You are so nice. Canberra is smarter than me, and I don't want to be Merzheimer and keeping my theories instead of reality. What I want to say to Canberra and my theory about fascist states keeping around when you have a big army. We have examples of not so big armies like Spain and Portugal, and they keeping fascist states until 70s. But also it is necessary to understand two things. Russia don't have a national mythos. Any country in the world who is cohesive and is not Switzerland, they need a mythos. They need a mythology to go around and keep the roots of the history. And Russia a real one doesn't have. They have only one thing which are using and was propped by Putin all the time. The war for a liberation from the Nazi Germany. That is the only thing which motivates the people, is the reason they put to invade Ukraine. You know, we're fighting Nazis like our grandfathers. And I agree, Russia have a very strong secret police, maybe say plural for that. Agree, they have a lot of repression force, and agree he has tens of thousands of special guards for the president defense. But also, let's keep in mind two things. A soldier who break the contract and go back to Tuva is a potential secessionist, is a potential man who will act against the president if he believes his comrades, soldiers who died or lost their limbs, is because the foolishness of Vladimir Putin. Again, don't forget a lot of FSB generals, colonels are even killed or sentenced to prison. I saw, and I talked with you 2 weeks ago about a colonel of FSB which was sentenced to 20 years because he made a mistake with coordinates of an Ukrainian airport, and he took a sentence of 20 years. No need to talk about how bad is the justice there, but how is the level of repression. The entire 5th directorate of FSB is all in jail or maybe already dead. And we can argue the Russia started to act like a fascist state in February, March with their Zs in all the cities. Now you can see everywhere they try to lose this symbol. They wash it. A lot of attitude is less to be obvious about this symbol, which is obviously fascist. And interesting, all the nationalistic military bloggers renounced this symbol 1 week ago. And sorry, I don't saw Vladimir Putin like Saddam Hussein and Russian Federation like Iraq in the 90s, more like Syria under Assad and Egypt under Mubarak. Big armies, very important when they have a problem, and with huge secret police. And this didn't stop revolution, didn't stop civil wars, didn't stop Mubarak to be dethroned. So Putin is not Franco. And Putin has an obsession which probably will be his end, Gaddafi.
And that's the funny thing, right? He's he keeps watching the thing that I don't think that's how he's going to end up. I think it's going to be a lot more subtle if he does end up in a bad way. I also don't think that Zeds being shunned now by Russian no bloggers is having that much of an effect. I think that at a lower level, among people who are not endlessly frustrated with all of the military decisions, who still live in the majority of Russia, is great. We are the best, just the best. We're saving the world from themselves, kind of bubble. I think they're still very, very happy to follow the Rushist Z. But hey, from your mouth, Daniel, to who's yours.
Imagine something like this: they lose Izium, lose the Army Corps. They will have thousands of people paraded like prisoners. And this information with lag will get received in all Russia in 1-2 weeks. how can you act politically, even if you are a dictator, in how big and depopulated is Russian Federation, and imagine they will keep the political regime. And you imagine all the generals, absolutely all the generals loyal to the court, because all get the job, because Putin will say, oh, we need to support our leader. I think we will see first Vladimir Putin is his fault. This war is made by him. He made the mistakes. We are not agree with him. And the first move when they try to make concessions, first time when they will talk about peace, Russians will react very badly against Putin.
See, I don't think that's true. And again, Daniel, we have always been in war with East Asia, right? That's the way it is. I really think that they have a much stronger grasp on the population, at the very least, to keep them what is this? To keep them passive, at the very least, domestically. I think that's the thing. Even if they go from supporting to something else, they'll go from supporting to ignorant, to passive, to disinterested. They're not going to go from supportive to, what's the word? Belligerent, cooey, right? They're staying. At the very least, they're staying passive, because that's kind of the nature of it. I don't think 1917 is happening. I don't think a coup is going to happen. I don't think a revolution is going to happen, because they don't do that. Because unlike Ukrainians, Russians are fundamentally passive, and when they retreated from Kiev, they retreated from Chernihiv, from Sumy. They fell back from Kharkiv almost to the border.
It's not the same thing.
I know it's not the same thing, but I'm saying look at what the response was then. It was nothing.
Yes.
It was but a failure.
Yes, but they don't lose thousands of prisoners. They don't lose divisions dead or wounded.
Nobody cares. The ones that they're losing, the country doesn't care about them. The people with any sense of political power within Russia don't care about them. They're prisoners. They're literally recruiting among patients in psychiatric institutions now. They are largely from the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder, from places all around the country that nobody cares about, especially not people in Moscow. I mean, look, if all of Tuva and Buryatia went up in flames and everybody died, do you think anybody in Moscow would care? No, of course not, because they don't even largely see them as a part of their nation, as a part of their country. They're just, some people off there that I guess they're part of Russia. That is Russia. That's all they care about. They don't care about the people from there in the slightest. Somebody's messaging me, resigned to their leadership. Yeah, they are. I mean, I think that's a very large part of it. There is a total resignation. Oh, this is just how it is. Putin runs things, and this is life, and it's better than 1998. Therefore, Putin's the best. Let's hear out Canberra and Puppy, and then let's expand this a little bit, and we'll circle back to you, Daniel. Canberra.
Yeah. So what they will do is they will find internal opponents or scapegoats. And to distract. So even if they don't directly blame the war, blame the war outcome on them, on these scapegoats, they will be made to fear some internal actor more than NATO or something like that. They will take the focus off this whole narrative that they've been spouting for the last while, and they'll start to blame Jews or the obvious internal opponents like Strelkin. They'll be he's up for the high wire if he's not careful. So he's been useful as, somebody to dampen down expectations and to act as somebody who's critical of generals. But in the end, all of those people get blamed for the loss, and the leadership, the king, the authoritarian leader or the monarch in this, that's how he really is behaving, insulates himself from all of the bad things that happen by saying it was all my bad advisor's fault. And also there's this other internal group who has been undermining us, and we have to purge them. And the entire nation's, the body politics rhetoric goes towards purging that scapegoated group. Thanks.
Puppy, I know it's hard to ask a philosopher to help us decipher things and make things clearer, but hey, once in a while.
I have to admit that I am instinctively a little bit with Daniel on this one, at least on the part that this seems, frankly, a bit different. Oceania has always been at war with East Asia, but there are some potential light bulb moments that I cannot conceive not really happening. So it might be a Ukrainian flag in Kherson in the next days or weeks, or maybe the Kerch Bridge blowing up. That is a good one, frankly. There is a reason why there is so much attention to that. And of course, it's the logistics, but it's not only the logistics. It's difficult to imagine, even in the Orwellian context of the current official Russian propaganda, how they could potentially sell as everything is completely normal if that bridge that for years has been, the symbol of the expansionism of the Kremlin blows up all of a sudden. It's just they cannot say anymore that the bridge is still there, or they cannot say anymore that someone was smoking the wrong brand of cigarettes too close to the bridge. I don't know what happens after, and I don't know how this will play out. And I do agree with Canberra that it is unlikely to trigger some, larger scale uprising, grassroots in Moscow. We will not see probably a Gaddafi moment. Although I cannot say it for sure. But it's difficult to imagine that the current line of Orwellian disinformation can last much longer, especially since there are Telegram's channels this day that were not featured in Orwell's books, and it seems to me that. At the very least, I will not go further than that, because beyond that, it's mostly speculation. It's also speculation getting there. But it's really difficult to imagine that it can go for an indefinite time in the future on with, everything is going fine.
Puppy, we have always been in war with Eurasia. It really comes down to that. I really think that most of the time it just comes down to that. The grasp, the grip of domestic propaganda is too strong. The people with much more political power than others, right? Those in Moscow and St. Petersburg, they are not feeling the pain from this. Yes, it might be a national embarrassment, but at the end of the day, they don't really care. What they care is about their Louis Vuitton bags and spare parts for their Mercedes, and that's what they care about. They do not care about the people in Buryatia and Tuva in the first place. They don't really care that much about what Russia has in Ukraine or not. Yes, it's a matter of national prestige, but my understanding is that to a very large degree, the social contract between the Russian middle and upper classes on the one hand and the Russian regime on the other is the regime gets to do whatever it wants. It gets to be glorious, feed the masses with reenactions of World War II, Great Patriotic War glory, and taking back the Soviet Union and building it, etc. But see, this is the thing, right? I think that is that's the thing. The people with actual political power don't really care. They didn't really care about anything. Maybe they care a bit about Crimea, but they don't really care. They care about the French wine and the Norwegian salmon, and they just want that back at the end of the day. And they're getting it. It's a bit more expensive. They're getting it through alternate channels. That's it. I think that's really it.
I do agree that this is the social contract, but those Louis Vuitton bags, those vacations in Crimea or on Como Lake, for that matter, or the Mercedes parts, those are being threatened. So may have not been until now. So,
I agree. I agree. But the thing is, if Russia leaves Ukraine, is forced to leave Ukraine, and they can still get all that stuff through unofficial channels, and then through visa restriction, that's probably going to be loosened up again real quick anyway. Of all the sanctions, that's probably the first to go, and they can still go on holiday in Turkey. I've just been told by someone, about some details about what Russians are partying it up on the Turkish coast all summer. And it's fine, for a few years. You don't have to go to Spain or France. You can just go to Turkey for a few years. Then you can go back to Spain and France. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. You can still get the spare parts to Georgia and Turkey and, maybe Kyrgyzstan, whatever. It's fine. It's not the end of the world. It's okay. They will be fine. They will carry on. It doesn't matter that much for them. It certainly doesn't matter that much for them if Russia keeps Crimea or keeps the Kerch Bridge or. It just isn't that important. It'd be very different if Russia proper were actually attacked, which it won't be because nobody's stupid enough, right? It's really. I really don't think this will be a precipitatory factor. Honestly, at this point, I am very cynical, and I'm going to be very cynical. I don't actually think this, but I will say something extremely cynical. There's an argument to be made that the Russian regime realized it's going to lose in Ukraine and going to get kicked out of Ukraine. And what they're doing now is trying to kill as many Ukrainians as they can before they get kicked out. And in exchange, and at the same time, they're trying to kill off as many of their own undesirables in the process as they can. I don't think they mind the casualties. I think that the Russian regime right now is rather enjoying the very high casualties that the Russian side is incurring. Because the people that are getting killed are those about whom they don't care about anyway. It is not Russians that are getting killed by and large. It is people from far-flung republics who are getting demographically too strong of anything for some in the Russian regime. The more ethno-nationalist ones especially. It is the prisoners, the psychiatric patients, and frankly, people who are press-ganged into it in occupied areas of Luhansk and Donetsk oblasts. That's who's getting killed by and large anyway. They don't mind if they lose more of those. They might actually be welcoming that. It might be an overly cynical way of looking at it, but I don't think it's that overly cynical at the end of the day. I'll leave it at that. I don't actually think this is the case, but I think there are people. I would bet that there is someone in some Russian ministry or some or some Russian some Russian general who's thinking exactly this way. I bet there is at least one. like, yeah, we've lost anyway. Let's get rid of as many of the ones we really don't care about off our own in the first place. That's just my thoughts there. Daniel M., is this too cynical a take for you to believe that at least one Russian general has?
I am agree with all your last statements, and I can endorse them because I hear Russian intellectuals, which I have the chance to saw them and hear them, and they say the same thing. This war is our opportunity to get lost of undesirable enemies from the youngs. And you talk about Tuvans and Buryats. No, it's about all youngs, because the young people in Russia is the most anti-Putin people you can find. I'm totally agree with Canberra, what he said. He is on the point. And I don't think I said anything about popular uprising in Russia. It's not about popular uprising. It's about our natural instinct of conservation. And any Russian with half a brain in his head, after Stalin, which they adore, after Brezhnev, and after 20 years with Putin, they know they will come to answer, to become a scapegoat. Yehuda talks about Jews, which are very easy target for Russians. You talk about minorities. I would say any people young able to keep an arm, a weapon in their hands and to be sent in Ukraine, they're also a target. But what I want you to explain, first you said about middle class. I don't know what you say about middle class, because if you refer to general characteristic of middle class, like us Europeans and Americans understand very well, that is gone. In 6 months in Russia, that middle class is gone. And here finance
No,
can
Daniel,
help you.
I mean explicitly and what I would call the broader, the non-ruling but people with good jobs, with money, outside of the industry, right? Outside of actually working in industry, that working in services or offices and the like in Moscow and St. Petersburg specifically. That you know who I mean, Daniel. People who drive
They
German
are
cars in
done.
Russia. Those people.
They are done. All the offices in big cities are empty. People don't come to work. Some of them were lucky and get paid for 2-3 months with half of salary. Sometimes they work half of time. These people are gone. They don't have the money. They become poor. And this will become more clearer every day is passing. And I don't think they will rise against Putin. I don't think we will see mass protests. This will be possible 10 years ago. Now is no chance, because the repression past 2 years, we saw what happened in big cities after last movement of Navalny thing. I don't think anyone have the guts to go outside. They don't know how to mobilize. The civil society is destroyed. They cannot organize. They have no chance to be Ukrainians. But I talk about generals. I talk about colonels, the guys from FSB, SVR, army, every strong man in a governor province, I don't know, from Kamchatka to Caucasus. Every guy knows he can be the target of repression, to be the the escaping goat. And when you know this, what you'll do, you'll go to the wall like in 38 when they yell "Za Stalina" before they were shot? I don't think so. I don't think any guy who had some brain, and he don't escape Russia because he loves Russia, and he's not in Uzbekistan or Baltics or everywhere, and he's there. They will stay and expect somebody to knock on his door and put him in a very cold cell and him and his family to be killed. That is the difference. And remember well what I saw, and I speculate months ago about how governors, how provinces become increasingly important before Moscow and federal government, even if they were named by Putin. Because if they know they will answer to the people, to their underlings, to their close circle, and also becoming the scapegoat of Putin, these guys will start to think for themselves. These guys will want to get more chance to survive. And when you have a strong repressive apparatus, from the police to secret police, they will not act in similar way in Moscow, St. Petersburg, Ekaterinburg, Sevastopol, and Vladivostok. Things will be different because the chief of police was not named by Putin, was named by governor. And maybe not the governor, by the mob boss who had in his pocket the governor. And the oligarch who had the big plant there, and he want to leave and not to land from the 6th floor. And that's why I said I see a movement and less chances for Putin to remain in power. Usually people speculate of popular uprising. These regimes don't go this way. It's about survival instinct of the second line, second echelon, who don't want to become the scapegoats and die. I hope I was a bit clear without my bad English.
I think we're going to have to disagree on this one, Daniel. I'm very sorry to say. I hope you're right, but I am just too cynical to hope that you're right. But we'll see. We'll see. Neither of us can prove it now. Let's just wait and see. I see you've changed Akhenatobi. You still have the at the same. Amenhotep IV. Go ahead.
Hi, Doman. I have a question from one of my followers who's tuning in right now. They just weren't able to speak. They may be working, but they are tuning in. So I'm going to go ahead and just, this is, I felt it's a good topic, so I'm going to go ahead and see the latest, what you might have to offer, what the panel may have to offer, any listeners that want to hop up and elaborate here. His question was, what do you think the importance of Nikopol is to both Russia and Ukraine in relation to being a main feeder of power into Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant? Thank you.
How close are we to that?
Okay, that's a really good question. Okay, Nikopol itself isn't that important to Russia because it's across the river. Russia doesn't control Nikopol. Let's be clear about that, right? Russia doesn't control Nikopol. What Russia is doing to Nikopol is destroying it because they don't get to have it. So they're shooting mass amounts of artillery and rocket artillery, that's MLRS, right, across the river from the power plant because they are terrorists, because that's what Russia basically is. The Russian military is a bunch of terrorists who want to kill lots and lots of Ukrainian civilians, and they're doing that in Nikopol. They're destroying. They're destroying the city. Obviously, you can't move the city away, and therefore Russia gets to keep destroying it. The importance of Nikopol to Ukraine, Nikopol is just yet another city in Ukraine. There's no strategic importance to Nikopol per se, and it doesn't really matter to Ukraine whether those shells are falling on Nikopol or Kryvyi Rih or Mykolaiv or anywhere else. But the very frustrating thing is it's more difficult to hit back at those shooting from the territory of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Now, previously, of course, Ukraine has taken out a number of systems from across the river using very precise loitering munitions, whereby they only take out the rocket launcher and nothing else at all. That's very good, obviously. Big fan of that. But there's relatively little to say beyond that. And no, there's no strategic importance. There's not really a strategic importance. It's just as important as any other set of Ukrainian civilians or Ukrainian civilian populations or Ukrainian city to Ukraine, and it's just another target for Russia. It's a target of convenience because that's what they can hit from across the river, from the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Thank you, Hannah Toby. Let's go to Termafella.
Hello. Oh yeah, I'm Termafella. Oh yeah. Anyway, regarding Russia and the transition of power from Putin, as it were, what I understood. I mean, I'm a layman on this. What I understood was Putin has taken out all the people that maybe be a threat to him in his top echelon or next to him, near to him over the years, and hearing that civil society is stuffed there as well. Kind of wondering who would be left to possibly take over. I mean, I have this thought that if somebody does take over from him and Russia wants to kind of ingratiate itself into the West, then there's going to be some kind of installation of somebody who's a bit more, or on the surface, a bit more Western friendly. And then they'll see how that goes. And trying to say, yeah, we got a new guy in now, he's going to reform and it's all going to be lovely. And basically it's going to be a big lie again. So I'm just wondering kind of where roughly from Russian society that there are any potential Putin substitutes.
Like the answer is who the hell knows. Nobody really knows. It's just one more case of someone might take over eventually. I bet Putin has some sort of a succession plan in mind, because he's the sort of guy who would definitely have a succession plan in mind somewhere down the line. But obviously that's not what you're asking about. You're asking about who else might be taking over eventually in a perhaps a little bit more violent fashion. I think we'll just honestly. I don't think we'll have an ability to figure that out ahead of time. Some people say Navalny. Navalny isn't exactly much better for other countries around Russia from a safety perspective. Navalny, just like Putin, is an imperialist fundamentally. He wishes to restore the Russian Empire in one form or another. He doesn't care for people who aren't ethnic Russians, and including those that he might consider ethnic Russians, who he would think of as traitors to Russia, which is many Ukrainians, right? Because they don't wish to be a part of Russia. Therefore, they're traitors and they should be destroyed. That's very much how Putin operates. We all remember that letter that Putin wrote last year in the summer last year, right around 1 year ago, calling Ukrainians effectively just that. So who knows who might take over? Depends on how it goes. Depends on how Russia will look like after the military collapse.
Yeah, it would have to be. Yeah, it'd probably have to be somebody who would be looked at from inside Russia as strong, from outside Russia, i.e. the extreme left and extreme right, to get behind as well, i.e. Western facing, somebody who's good Western facing. So I mean the list must be quite short, but yeah, no idea who. All right, then. Thanks very much.
So that's the thing. Kara-Murza, for example, he might be interesting, right? But he doesn't stand a chance. He's not an ethnic Russian. He's an ethnic Tatar, at least in part. Look at his last name. He might be actually useful, right? Or Garry Kasparov. But again, there's no way there would be support for them, right? There are people for whom there might be popular support, at least somewhat, which would be necessary, at least somewhat, who stand no chance because they are not who stand no chance, who are completely useless in the sense that they are just as imperialistic and violent, or they are possibly actually a little bit Western oriented, but stand no chance because there's no way there might be popular support for them. So it's kind of catch-22 there. Puppy.
Oh, thank you very much. Cheers.
Cheers. Puppy, go ahead.
Do you want to know what is the real solution for this genocidal war, Domen?
What is the real solution?
The real solution is Mr. Berlusconi, Putin's friend, that yesterday on prime time TV said, I'm going to quote and translate, that there is only one way to end the war in Ukraine, which is finding one or two protagonists of current politics, close friends of Putin, and able to put pressure on Zelensky for an agreement. That's what he said on TV. I admit that I had to go back to the original video to make sure that it was not being, misquoted by the press. But that is exactly what he said. So that's the proposal coming from Putin's friend. I'm not sure. We cannot know if it has been agreed somehow or coordinated with the Kremlin or Putin himself. Who knows? That's probably too conspiratorial, but sounds like, timing.
So Italy is up for parliamentary elections in 2.5 weeks, is it?
Yeah, the 25th. So it's like...
So, in other words, Berlusconi, who is running for election, is pitching himself as the one solution to the war in Ukraine himself, because he is a close friend of Putin's, because he went to hang out with Putin in Crimea back in, 2014, 2015, after the Russian annexation of Crimea. Together, they stole from the Massandra cellars. We remember that. At least I remember that. Yeah, that's who Berlusconi is, the friend of Putin, who can persuade Putin to, go and negotiate with Ukraine a surrender of Ukraine and a surrender of vast tracts of territory from Ukraine. Who does he think in Ukraine would ever agree to that, I think, is the question.
Yeah, the answer is that the audience for this message is obviously not people in Ukraine. I guess the first audience for this message is some portions of Italians that could potentially see the logic and not see how twisted the logic is. But they say, okay, we know that he's been hanging out for decades with Putin. So he's a close friend of Putin. He's been in Yalta right after. People don't know where Yalta is in Italy, but they have been in Sardinia together with Putin for years. So he's a close friend of Putin. So maybe he's the right one to put pressure on Zelensky, who is identified in this particular pitch as the bad guy. So that's the twisted logic of it. The Italian audience might not be, frankly, I could see some people based on, the current public conversation, some people that could see, okay, maybe he has a chance, at least he's close close friend to one of the two. So, but it's like 1942, imagine, let's find the true friends of Hitler who can put pressure on Churchill. It's the same logic, but a portion of the Italian public is lobotomized and will probably buy that. And it looks like they are going to buy that enough numbers to make his coalition win the next elections. So, as an additional point later in the interview, he mentioned explicitly himself, and then he was pressed who else, and he mentioned Merkel, the other one who could join the efforts. I don't think Angela Merkel might have much of an appetite for that, but hey, what do I know? He explicitly made the name of himself and Merkel.
I don't think she counts as current political actor, whatever the wording was, right? Because she very publicly and very explicitly retired from politics. I don't think she'll count as that anymore.
Yeah.
I'm very frustrated with this narrative of Ukraine has to do something politically to put an end to this is rearing its ugly head again. The only thing for Ukraine to do is to dump more lead and more HE and more Gimlers and more, all the other stuff. Hopefully attack them sooner rather than later onto Russians' heads to engender the goodwill, just like they did when they were kicking them out of Snake Island, just like they did, now around Kharkiv, around Kherson. This is the only thing for Ukraine to do. That's the only correct way out of this. Kick Russia out. And then, once Russia is kicked out of Ukraine, get under the US nuclear umbrella, and then it's fine. Then Russia can't do jack shit anymore. That's all that needs to happen.
Yeah, allow me 10 seconds cue. Every time I mention Berlusconi and the likes, but in particular Berlusconi, I really have the urge to say that I don't understand how he can be a member in good standing of European politics. How he can be a member in good standing of European politics. Either, his colleagues at the European People's Party and the like are not reading what he says. No, they are like pretending to be deaf. That's something that, blows my mind. Just had to say that.
Yeah, that's the other part of it. Danny.
Робить вигляд, наче все ок, і що це абсолютно нормально, що посеред Європи просто існує сучасний концентраційний табір, який влаштувала Російська Федерація, і де вони катують людей, вбивають людей, знущаються над людьми, а потім ще й вихваляються. Ці світлини, вони ж просто, були кинуті в обличчя міжнародним європейським організаціям, в тому числі, до речі,
No, we just lost Danny, I think.
членів ООН, якому можу нагадати, що є не тільки права, а ще й зобов'язання. Так от, своїми правами Росія в ООН користується, в тому числі, що стосується України, наприклад, щодо там фабрикування по Запорізькій АЕС. А щодо відповідальності, то тут чомусь всі забувають. Чомусь ООН там соромиться щось сказати, поїхати, проконтролювати. А в цей час з їх просто мовчазної згоди там відбуваються страшні речі. Над людьми просто знущаються. Їх катують щодня. Це жахлива історія, на яку мені, наприклад, надзвичайно складно дивитися.
Максиме, я, власне, ви частково відповіли на питання, яке я хотіла вам поставити щодо того, наскільки міжнародна спільнота...
I just wanted to kind of say about what Domen and Bertrand were talking about. Very frustrating indeed, the political narrative coming out of Italy, but I was just gonna say that it's likely gonna get worse in other countries as well. Bulgaria possibly will change its tune after they change government. And one thing that I saw in the news today in Romania was that Zelensky made as part of one of his speeches, mentioned that a number of people that have double citizenship, especially Russians and Romanian citizenship, so Ukrainians that have double citizenship, have been part of a contraband organization that worked together with border guards that were also corrupt. And that...
Who said that?
Zelensky. So Zelensky spoke about people that were part of a contraband band. They were double citizens, so Russian and Romanian, Ukrainian double citizenship, and that he's gonna remove the double citizenship of those people, remove the Ukrainian citizenship. So that's gonna be an announcement that will be used against Ukrainian positions. So I expect the AUR party from Romania to get on top of that statement that Zelensky made and twisted and say, see, he hates Romanians, and not only does he hate Russians, he also hates Romanians, and we told you so. They want to eliminate the Romanian language from Ukraine, and we need to get our territories back that historically belong to us. It's exactly what they're going to say. I'll send you the article, Doman, so you can have a look at it. But yeah, so I hope I was clear on what I said. I can't, of course, understand Ukrainian to see what Zelensky said, but there's a YouTube clip that has English subtitles that is part of that announcement. So I'm going to send you that, Doman, and I'll have to run, and maybe you can have a look and make a couple of comments, because I can only be online for another like 9 minutes.
Thank you, Danny. Send me that. I'll have a quick look. I can't go listen to stuff right now, but I'm sure there'll be some comments I can find elsewhere. Finance. Oh, I have a question for finance. Finance. Check your notifications. I think news just broke of you having been very busy around Northern Europe. And sourcing additional and creating additional and launching possibly very soon additional lines of products, and I think you'll get what I'm getting at, and I think you should look into that a little bit more. Puppy, you go ahead in the meantime, but I think we're having a new commercial created.
I was just following up on what Danny said, and I do agree that this is the risk. The risk. In fact, if you had a chance to listen to Zelensky's interview to the ABC, he repeated several times that, of course, Ukraine will win this war, and it will win this war, we know, and it will kick Russia out of its borders. But at some point, when pressed by the interviewer on the specific question, what will happen if the political landscape in enough European countries changes? And Zelensky's answer to that was the one that caught my interest, because he said, then Russia will win. Now, I don't think that this is going to happen, but the fact that he himself identifies this quite explicitly as the only mention that he made during a longish interview, the only mention of one way for Russia to prevail, it's significant. I think that honestly think that possibly the greater risk right now is there. It's the political landscape in European countries. I don't want to overestimate this risk. I think that there is a very solid chance that despite everything, some countries will have a further Prague, more or less artificial events. Some countries will have Italian style of BS. And we will see other people that are more sympathetic to the Kremlin becoming more popular because of gas prices in other countries in Europe. But at the end of the day, the most likely scenario right now is that, the collective effort will continue. However, I do see this as a non-negligible type of risk and something that should be really watched carefully. All I wanted to say. So, in a sense, I agree with Danny on that.
Good afternoon.
Who's that? Simon, is that you? Right, Simon. If you look at your screen, sorry, Simon, you need to wait a second. If you look at your screen, you see a couple of very polite people called Finance in Ukraine Armchair General, who were very kind to put their hands up, because that is what people do in polite company.
That worked. Sorry,
yes, but if you look at your screen, maybe you would have intuited that that's what people do around here. rather than just come up and start barging in to a conversation the first time when they show up.
It's literally my first attempt at using this.
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay.
I realize that, but most people when looking at a screen see two people with their hands up wouldn't just start speaking straight away, but would instead try to figure out how to put their hand up. At least
I don't have the hands up. I don't see anyone with hands up.
You don't see little icons with yellow hands up.
No, I don't have
that. Over finance and over the chap with the Ukrainian flag and St. HIMARS on it?
I'm afraid I don't. I'm going to have to see if I can reconfigure this.
I think that means that your phone is acting up a bit, but you should have a heart with a plus somewhere around the bottom of your screen, right around the middle. Do you see a little heart with a plus on it?
I do, yes, I see that.
Okay, if you click that, it will give you an option of various emojis, including the hand up on the far right of that.
Okie doke.
Yes. Now, if you Google Twitter Spaces and how to use Twitter Spaces, see, there we go. It gives you all the instructions on how to do that, which is another thing that most people when first interacting with a new piece of technology might do to learn how to best use it. Thank you, Simon. If you're so kind as to please mute yourself, we're going to go to finance and to Ukraine Armchair General first. Thank you very much, Simon, because we like to keep order, and then we'll swing back to you. Finance.
Yeah, I don't see any military expert. Oh, Tim is up. Can someone give me some specs on the Hellfire? Like, how far does it go? What's it best used for? Like, what should we like about the Hellfire system besides that it will do something or other to help the Ukrainian armed forces win? Because it's a system, and they're good at those.
Finance, why would you be bringing up something like a Hellfire missile? Why would that be?
Norway has suggested that this is a fine, upstanding product that they think the Ukrainian armed forces could use.
So you're saying that Norway is sending Hellfire missiles to Ukraine? Well, that is excellent news, Finance. Wherever you might have gotten those news from, I have no idea. Tim, Hellfire missiles. What good are Hellfire missiles? I mean, the name is very impressive, that's for sure.
Yeah, this is one of those American missile systems with absolutely spectacular names, like ATACMS, like Stinger, like Harms, Alarms. They always have really butch names for their missile systems. Now, the Hellfire missile is a fairly lightweight anti-tank missile. It is predominantly used as an air-to-surface system, so it tends to be air-launched, but it can be ground-launched. You'll see that the Norwegian MOD, they tweeted out a lovely picture of a Norwegian chap with a Hellfire missile on a little tripod. They are a fairly versatile weapon. They've got a nice range of range, so to speak. So they can be used at reasonably short range, kind of out to 500 meters, and all the way out to about 10 kilometers, 11 kilometers out. They are supersonic. They have they're actively homing, so they use a laser designator based homing system, and they can carry a variety of warheads. So in the anti-tank role, you typically see two types of warheads. You see a heat charge, a high explosive anti-tank, which is basically a lump of explosive. You also see shaped charges, which are basically kind of hollow cone-shaped steel or titanium things. And the aim of those is to create a little kind of superheated spear of metal, which will basically bonk the side of the tank and either penetrate the tank completely and cause a kinetic effect inside the tank, or they will dent the tank steel so as to cause spalling and therefore splintering on the other side. That's Hellfire. Usually an air-launched system. They're used on a variety of Western helicopters, including Apache Longbow, etc., but can also be ground-launched. They're fairly expensive as anti-tank weapons go. So if you think about God, I can't remember exactly how much an NLAW costs. It's about 40 or 50 grand. The American NLAW, help me out here. What's the American version of the NLAW? Javelin. That's the one. Yeah. So the American Javelin costs about the same. Hellfire costs about 150 grand. But it's a somewhat heavier and more versatile system. So that's Hellfire. It's a fancy missile, usually launched from a helicopter.
And notably, Ukraine. Sorry, Finance. Notably, Ukraine also has some of these things already, similar ones, because Sweden gave them Robot Sytten, I guess is 17 in Swedish, Robot Sytten, which is a Hellfire, a version of a Hellfire missile developed by Bofors to target naval targets. So it's basically a naval variant of a Hellfire, also called Robot Sytten, used for sort of ships that come too close to shore. Range is about 10 kilometers or so, I think, and that's either ground fired or off of a gunboat, and there's options there already. So it's not a completely new thing for Ukraine. Ukraine also has been operating the Brimstone, which is launched off the back of a truck, ostensibly, that's been given to them by the UK, which started off as a Hellfire, but was completely redesigned and is the shape and size of a Hellfire missile, but internally it's all completely different, but with a similar purpose. Finance?
Yeah, my question was going to be, is this a sign of Ukraine is planning on using them on those choppers we're watching fly close to the deck? Or is this something that they're going to rig up surface to surface, and that's a totally useful approach in that
So
fashion?
it's gonna be ground to ground or air to ground. They're not going to be using it in a ground to air fashion.
So
it's
yeah,
not meant for.
I meant to say ground to ground is my second choice. Is this something you're going to rig up on land?
Probably ground to ground.
Ground to ground. Tim,
Probably
is
ground to ground.
that a proven battle? Is there proven battle tested use of ground to ground Hellfire missiles?
Yeah, I believe there is. I mean, that's the role the Norwegians use them in. And the Norwegians absolutely don't fuck about when it comes to this sort of thing. Whether that's ever been fired in anger in that way, I'm not 100% sure. The missile has been used to take out some really quite high-profile scroats. Now, I'm just reading that the missile was used to kill Anwar al-Awlaki, who was a senior now demilitarized Al-Qaeda leader. Was also used to kill the Hamas chap Ahmed Yassin, and also Mohammed Emwazi, who was the British-born ISIS activist known as Jihadi John, who I believe was responsible for the execution of a journalist. I think, I can't remember which one, but he was a total asshole, and he got the good news thanks to a Hellfire missile. So they have been used in anger quite a lot. They have taken out modern, sophisticated armor. There was a friendly fire incident in Gulf One, in which an Abrams tank was taken out. So yes, very much a battle-proven system.
Thank you, Tim. Very much so. Right. Let's go to Ukraine Armchair General. Go ahead, and then we have two Norwegians with us, Jørn and Erlend. Ukraine Armchair General.
Hi guys. So I wanted to ask a question about the Izium salient. In the last few months, I've seen some estimations and military maps that said that a lot of troops were concentrated around the city, and my assessment was that they were going to combine forces after the Russians broke through around Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. Yeah, and I mean, evidently some of these forces retracted to go to the Donbass and Kherson area, and they continue to do some small attacks around Barvinkova, etc. But I still think it's mysterious how they've had so few successes and never broke through further than Liman, etc. So how come they have never exploited this possibility to combine forces with the people around Severodonetsk, and how comes we hear so few things about this salient? Thank you.
So we hear quite a few things because Russians keep trying to push south from Izium towards I forget what all the villages directly to the south of Izium are. So if you read Ukrainian General Staff daily reports on what Russians shelled in the last day, they keep noting stuff from to the south of there. But yeah, that there's not that much, and that salient is going to be no more very briefly. I'm sure we're going to turn more to that as CJ comes up. I just really wanted to hear Jörn and then quote about the Norwegian help in terms of Hellfire missiles to Ukraine. Jörn, go ahead.
Thank you. I can speak to the Hellfire missiles. I've actually fired them myself. I fired 4 of them when I was in the Norwegian Armed Forces. And I've been looking for Norway to donate these because they're currently not using it. It's in storage. And the version that's being given to Ukraine is the Swedish-built naval version. It's a laser-guided missile. And when we used it, the official numbers were that it had a minimum range of 1 kilometer and a maximum of 8. But I fired it at 9, so I guess it can probably go beyond that. It's very efficient. It can be used against tanks, but it's specially designed to go through a double hull of frigate or small boat. So I would imagine that they would use it in land-to-land or surface-to-surface way to defend coastal areas. And it's very mobile. It's very easy to use. I think I could have taught someone to use it in 48 hours if I had to. So I would say that this is something you could deploy along the coastline to free up forces to use in other ways, because it's when you have these guys along the coastline, you're going to have heavy losses if you try to come ashore there.
Is it called the Robotsytten? Did I get that right? Or Robotsytten?
Yeah, that's correct. We actually we only fired from surface to surface with this. I actually tried to use the US-made air-to-surface missile as well, but they had quite a high fail rate because they weren't made to launch from the ground, and also Norway bought them as test missiles for because they were cheap and beyond their date of use. So that might be it as well. But I'm quite certain that all of the missiles that they get from Norway will be the Robotsytten Swedish-made naval version.
Is there any big difference between the naval version and what you can use against tanks? I mean, does it matter if you fire the tank or a frigate?
Yeah, well, when you see how little you need to make those Russian tanks cook off, I have no doubt that it would be efficient. But the warhead is a bit different, and the flight path is a bit different because it's made to launch from the surface.
So it's kind of sea skimming kind of idea. So you want to be, if you're in a very flat terrain like in Kherson Oblast, it's probably okay. But if you're somewhere a little bit more hilly, you might prefer a Hellfire designed for ground to ground, like launch from a Striker as opposed to one of these, right? That's kind of the idea.
Yeah, it actually has a higher flight path because it needs to get altitude first. While when we use the missiles made for Apache gunships, they sometimes didn't get high enough and landed short of the targets. That happened. It was a bit embarrassing when we were having a show for the NATO Secretary General. I don't remember his name. It was from Scotland. And we fired 4 missiles, and 3 of them landed short of the target.
Love it. Thank you very much, Jörn. Erlend, go ahead.
Well, I believe Jörn covered mostly, and my input is just that these are also possible to use with drone laser designators, and as I understand, Ukraine has at least some capacity when it comes to that, recently acquired. And yeah, they have a very high flight path, these ones. I've seen them in display up north. And I know that they've been in storage for a long time, and was also hoping that they would be delivered. That's very good news. And I also believe that they don't have any problems penetrating the top of a Russian tank. Yeah, they cook off with smaller ammunitions anyway. So hope that will be a good contribution, and Slava Ukraini.
Headam Slava. Excellent. CJ, our dear artillery officer, what do you think of Hellfire missiles? Norway sending 160 of the robot naval version, Swedish sub-design naval version to Ukraine. What do you reckon? What do you reckon, CJ? Good thing or very good thing?
I mean, I generally think a good thing. I mean, I don't know, the Hellfire term has been overused a lot over the last 50 years. Again, this is a 50-year-old missile, based system, initially designed, of course, to be anti-tank, fired from, helicopters. And so everything that's come since then, you've got a wide range of options. You've got different countries making, I guess, and I wasn't aware of any sort of C versions. And then also, of course, you have ones that are just basically samurai swords. And then you have other ones which have a bunch of different cluster munitions. I mean, there's really a lot of things that fall under the quote-unquote Hellfire title. But in any case, any sort of laser-guided munitions, as many people have noted in here, are going to be very beneficial for the Ukrainians as they try and hit more and more moving targets. They have a lot of GPS-guided munitions, which is great for static targets, like things like ammo dumps, bridges, and so on. But if they really want to have a lot more effects on the Russian military in their country, then they need to go after moving targets, whether it be, ships near the coast or tanks moving that are a little bit outside of Stugna range. And so this kind of Hellfire system probably can shoot further than that. So regardless of how they're used, if they're laser guided, then they can be used against a variety of targets. And as someone else mentioned, TB2s can laser. There's a lot of different systems that can use lasers to guide them in, which gives Ukraine a lot of options. So I think it is good news at the end of the day.
Range is about 11 kilometers, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's for the C version, you mean? Because I'm not familiar with that. I'll take your word on it.
It's 11 kilometers, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not sure, I guess my question would be, of course, like, why now? There's other systems that Ukraine has that can shoot much further, but I guess in my point of view, the more options that Ukraine has, the better off they'll be moving forward, especially if we get into a situation where, Kherson continues to be successful and now Crimea is on the plate. And this is a situation where you'd want as many missiles as you could to keep the Russian Navy as far back as possible. So.
CJ, while you're here, Ukraine has been using the British version of Hellfire, which is Brimstone, for some time, which I believe is a slightly heavier and exclusively air-launched system. Do we know that? Do we know how that's working?
Well, they have, this is the crazy thing about it. It's the same exact sort of situation where we talked about an initial missile type that has been given to Ukraine, but in a ground launch form. So I've seen a couple videos where they've been extremely successful. I don't think they have a large quantity of these Brimstone missiles, but from what I've seen, they've taken out a lot of different targets. And of course, since it's a very high value NATO weapon system, Russia, of course, has claimed to destroy all the Brimstones 20 times over. So, that's how you know your system is very effective, is if people say it's been destroyed countless times, just like with HIMARS and the like.
Thank you, CJ. Shall we go to Mark?
Let's go to Mark, and then I want a bit of an update from CJ, who's qualified to give military updates as to what's going on around Kharkiv. Mark?
Hey, thanks, Doman. Hey, CJ, good morning. Hey, I was just kind of curious, what happened to all that Russian artillery that they seem to use so effectively in that June-July timeframe to really push back the Ukrainian lines? It seems to be a complete non-factor.
Mark, I have a question for you. Yeah. What have Finance's tobacco products been busy doing the last couple of months?
So you think it's just an ammunition, taking out the ammunition has neutralized all the artillery?
I know, CJ. What do you reckon? You're an RT officer.
So the important thing to consider, of course, is, that was kind of the main story in June, right? The idea that the Russian artillery was decimating Ukrainians because they were able to fire 60,000 rounds a day. And so what happened, of course, near the mid to the end of June was the Ukrainians got a couple different weapon systems, of course, HIMARS and others. It's hard to say, right? We see these articles coming out of Kherson, And regardless of how we're pretty sure it's going well, they're taking a lot of casualties, and Ukrainians are taking a lot of casualties from Russian artillery. So it never went away. It's still extremely effective against Ukrainians. The difference is now, of course, Ukraine has a lot more options. They have, almost 300 NATO artillery pieces. They have, as they capture more ammo dumps from the Russians and others, they have more ammunition for their legacy Soviet systems that had been pretty much out of ammo since June. They also have more armored vehicles to get around. They have more drones. I mean, it's sort of like this very cumulative effect where basically Ukraine needed a bunch of different things to overcome this: counter battery radar, UAVs, aircraft missiles, HARMs. I mean, it's all part of this joint firepower picture. And so, at the end of the day, Russian artillery is still pretty strong. But as people have noted time and time again, I guess in the past week, everyone is very keen on this topic because, with the idea that Russia might be purchasing a couple million artillery shells from North Korea. I mean, how can you say it's going well for them? Yes, that artillery shells are probably still lethal, but they're probably even more inaccurate than the Soviet ones they were using. And so every day goes by, the Russian artillery is just less of a threat to the Ukrainians, even if it is still a threat. So sorry, there's no good answer, but basically HIMARS. We can just go with that answer and call it a day if you want.
Sure. Thank you, CJ. I'm sure glad you're on our side. Dome and Tim, thank you for hosting.
Thank you, Mark. So you're not glad that we're on our side, you're just glad that CJ's on our side? I see how it is, Mark. I see how it is. Just kidding.
Of course
CJ. CJ, let's talk about Kupiansk. What's cooking? What has Ukraine done over the last 48 hours between Kharkiv and Kupiansk?
Okay, we'll stick. I prefer just to stick to what we know exactly, just because there's a lot of speculation right now. It's a gigantic portion of the front, so it's a little bit hard to say with any certainty. So Kupiansk. So if you think of Kharkiv, there's basically two cities that matter right now in terms of the fight we're talking about, right? Izium in the southwest of Kharkiv, which is only about 7 or 8 kilometers from the Ukrainian front now. And then Kupiansk, which is to the northeast of Izium, on the same highway, and pretty much a major supply hub that gets troops and supplies not only into Izium and the rest of Kharkiv, but Luhansk, and even in some situations the northern part of Donetsk. So this is a very key spot. It kind of hooks Belgorod to the rest of the occupied territories. So really key that Russia has control of this. And so what's happened in the last 48 hours is
CJ, let's be clear about this. Kupiansk is the railway hub for all of Russian efforts everywhere to the north of Severodonetsk. Look at the city of Severodonetsk. Look at all of the occupied territories to the north of Severodonetsk. All of those territories are supplied through Kupiansk. Look at a railway map of the area. Look at a road map of the area. All of the roads, all of the railways pretty much going from Russia to everywhere that Russia occupies to the north of Severodonetsk, except for the true border areas between Belgorod and Kharkiv, that little strip of land that Russia holds there. All of those lines go through Kupiansk. Everything goes from Russia through Vovchansk to Kupiansk and then onwards.
And this is really important.
This is why we're so ecstatic. This is why Craig is losing his mind for the past 24 hours.
Because that's extremely important to note, because if you think about it, right, if the supply routes from Severodonetsk north fall apart, it means the front falls apart, which means the 60 to 80,000 Ukrainian soldiers and TDF and border guards that are holding that northern half of the Donbass front are now free for Donetsk, and it's pretty much game over for Russia. So now it's just a matter of when. But in this situation, what's very interesting is Kupiansk has been in HIMARS range for now 2.5 months, right? And especially in the last week, Kupiansk, which again was nominally 60 kilometers, give or take 10 kilometers from the Ukrainian front, was pretty much untouchable by everything except sabotage and, of course, our friends over at Lockheed Martin. So what is a little bit different about this now is they're now in artillery range of just tubed artillery. So the question, of course, is how on earth did this happen? Well, there was basically 48 hours ago began. Again, I've seen some people say it was just an accident. It was no accident that this worked out this way, but basically a three-pronged attack into Kharkiv. There's, of course, the river crossings and whatnot in Sversky Donetsk in two spots in order to come from the south. There was, of course, this push at Balaklia, which trapped at least a brigade of Russians there and pretty much effectively routed them, and then another movement directly for Kupiansk. So three movements, three serious problems for the Russians to face, and possibly, again, it's a little bit unclear exactly where the line settled, at least 30 kilometers of penetration. So a gigantic push within a 48-hour period. It's a full mechanized army, NATO standards, pretty much as good as you could hope for. And it's a very different situation than Kherson, which, of course, people are also following closely, which is line after line of heavily fortified positions, a lot of artillery, and a lot of aircraft support, albeit not many supplies due to the fact that it's very difficult, as we saw yesterday with the videos, to get across the Dnipro. And so the main difference, of course, with Kharkiv is it's relatively unguarded to an extent. It used to have about 20 BTGs at the height of the Donbass attack, 25 BTGs even. And again, even if you say, well, those BTGs weren't full strength, all right, fine, I would agree generally, but still 15 to 20,000 Russian soldiers, so quite a sizable force. However, when Ukraine announced it was going on this counteroffensive in Kherson, whether or not you say it was a feint, it's fine, but Russia thought that was a priority, and so they moved out about 15,000, 10,000 of those soldiers, leaving all of Kharkiv and Izium with about 8 to 10 BTGs at most, so about 7 to 8,000 people. And so what Ukraine did was they exploited this and basically attacked where Russia was not heavily defended, and they hit Chechen National Guard, they hit LNR, DNR conscripts that were nominally led by Russian officers. We saw the lieutenant colonel, which is basically a battalion commander, get captured, which was very much not a good day.
He was he a sober? He was a sober lieutenant colonel, right?
I've seen a couple different things. You definitely could be right. I was tracking that the Sober were in the city, and this position that was captured was somewhere in the northern outskirts.
Close to Volokhiv Yar, yeah.
It definitely could be. It definitely could be the case where it was Sober, but in any situation, a pretty big loss on three different fronts, and this was carefully planned to avoid major Russian troop concentrations and, in some situations, bypass Russian garrisons and get behind them and destroy the artillery, with at least 3 Russian artillery batteries being destroyed, which is pretty much effective battalion. And the reason why this is specifically significant is because, basically, the Russian defensive plan in Kharkiv looks like, well, we have a lot of area to cover, so we're going to rely on 2 key things, right? The sort of Spetsnaz and Chechens that can react quickly and plug any gaps, and also our artillery, which has a pretty long range and is mobile in a lot of situations. Well, the way that Ukraine overcame this was by not going straight for the city, but making an appearance, especially in Balaklia, that they were going to. And so Russia basically immediately committed their reserve about 12 hours into the city, and Ukraine didn't go there. They went around them and pretty much cut them off and started hitting them, from all angles. So that sort of important critical capability was knocked out. The second one, of course, is the artillery, and by bypassing the Russians and going straight for the artillery, they destroyed effectively almost all the Russian artillery in Kharkiv, or at least the southern part of southeastern, Kharkiv. And so now that unit can't respond. And so they basically had what we call freedom of maneuver to go very deep behind the Russian lines and really open up the front. Whether they bypass every city and are making a beeline to Kupiansk, I think is a little bit hard to say. It's clear that they made it about 30 kilometers towards Kupiansk, but there's still probably a good 20 kilometers to go. But either way, that means that now Kupiansk is in regular artillery range, which means no real supplies can move in mass between Kupiansk and Izium, meaning the situation for the Russians in Izium is getting more dire every day. It's getting more dire in Kupiansk, and as you pointed out, Doman, most importantly, this is pretty much, if you think of like the Donbass and Kharkiv as one combined front, it means the entire northern half is now severely threatened. And that's pretty much all the updates there, unless I missed anything, Doman.
Yeah, Yehuda says it might only be 10.
10 what?
10 kilometers.
Oh, well, I sure hope so. 10 kilometers away is in range of pretty much everything, including heavy mortars. So, that's a good day.
10 kilometers is a rock throwing range at that point. Maybe you're looking 20 kilometers to the center of Kupiansk, and you're looking 10 kilometers to the edge of it. Either way, right? It's very close. Even if it is 20 is the 2/3 rule, right, for artillery already. Easy pickings for M777s, for Panzerhaubitze, for whatever else.
Yeah, so basically, when Russia, first was trying to organize the defense of this area, they got hit by HIMARS and Kupiansk. So the barracks were hit again, the command posts were hit, really degrading their ability to move quickly. And the other thing, too, of course, is just the general panic that set in. You can see it really not only on Russian Telegram, but by people actually surrendering. Basically, even if, Ukraine isn't necessarily everywhere in Kharkiv yet, the effect is the same with, basically HIMARS explosions going off, with artillery going off in really close to, basically, on roads and things like that they didn't expect that on. And then last but not least, with these sort of armored movements. Again, the note from Russian Telegram, the Russian military analyst yesterday that was so interesting was the idea that perhaps a single tank company plus, so 15 tanks led the breakthrough at Balaklia against, effectively what is a whole brigade's worth of people. And again, when you're defending an area, you should be able to defend against, basically a unit 3 times your size. That's the idea, right? We talked about the 3-to-1 ratio. A brigade is supposed to be able to hold out against a full division, and they got smacked by a company with, supporting artillery fire and everything. So really a bad sign that the defenses there were not truly prepared, and a good sign that this was very well planned and very well executed.
CJ, it's a question on something else. I'll return to this in a second. Question from a listener. Could you mount those Hellfires on the back of a Humvee or some such? Any chance that might work?
Yeah, I mean, well, if they're specifically a sea launch variant, again, I'm not too familiar with that, so I don't want to speak out of turn. But, we've seen Ukrainians mount a bunch of different missile types to vehicles that had, definitely weren't designed initially for that. So I imagine if they really want to, for some lighter vehicles, they could certainly do that.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, CJ. CJ, let's talk a little bit about how significant, not just how significant, but how impressive it is for Ukraine to move so far, so quickly from Kharkiv in the direction of Kupiansk. 48 hours, let's call it 50 kilometers distance made, thereabouts. How big a deal is that?
I mean, this is the last thing, unfortunately, I have time for, but it's a huge deal because not only does it show that they can overcome, entrenched defenses in Kherson, which requires a lot of planning and a lot of logistical support, but it also shows that they can use the command and control and communications to basically navigate a movement that large. So they've basically mastered the 2 key forms of the offense there. And that's a great sign that they have the full spectrum of combined arms somewhat mastered, which is really a bad news for Russia because they can either, they were really counting on being a more mobile force by having, all their vehicles and, mobile artillery. They really hoped that, in the case of the war escalating to any larger degree with Ukraine, that they'd be able to at least counter them by being more mobile. And this specific offensive in Kharkiv shows that they simply can't keep up with the Ukrainians. So obviously the war is not over. I still got a long way to go. But with more vehicular support, it's definitely within reach to win, much sooner than I think people thought.
One more piece of info before you drop, CJ. Ukraine destroyed 37 Russian artillery systems yesterday, between tubed and rocket artillery combined.
That's just the ones that are confirmed. So, that's I would imagine it's probably a bit more, but that is like a whole brigade's worth of artillery just gone. So they have to pull from Liman, they have to pull from other places, and that's bad too because it means those fronts that they're pulling artillery from are now at risk.
And also, 37 artillery systems means that they were caught out, right? Artillery shouldn't be sufficiently close to the front for tanks to be taking out artillery.
Yeah, I mean, this is, and this was also newer artillery too. So it wasn't like, a bunch of DNR, LNR, conscripted old artillery pieces. This was MIFTAs, this was 2S3s, which are slightly newer than the 2S1s. It was a bunch of systems that had no business being captured or killed, and really just shows how deep the penetration was.
Thank you, CJ. Join us back when you have time. By the way, for anybody who doesn't know, in a few hours' time, at noon Eastern, so in 5.5 hours from now, we'll be joined by Vasil Virozub, who's a military chaplain and was captured and tortured by the Russians in March and April this past year. And we will be we'll be talking to him and hearing his harrowing story. You'll be able to hear firsthand how it is to be a POW in Russian captivity, and not just as a soldier, but as a chaplain, and not exactly a young chaplain at that. So do tune in for that. I'm sure we'll have CJ back when we're joined by Vasil in 5.5 hours time. Right, summary of the day thus far. Norway sending Robot Sytten, Swedish subvariant of Hellfire missiles, to Ukraine to help Ukraine fight off the Russian invasion. Ukraine making significant progress both in Kherson as well as on Kharkiv Oblast fronts, pushing ever closer to Kupiansk, a major, and I mean major, capital M kind of major, capital MAJOR kind of major railway and logistics hub for Russians in occupied Kharkiv Oblast, that basically supplying all of what Russia occupies, more or less all of what Russia occupies in Kharkiv Oblast, except for some truly border areas, as well as the northern parts of Donetsk and Luhansk Oblasts logistically. So it's a very much a crucial railway and logistics hub for Russia, and Ukraine now has it well within regular old tubed artillery range. From yesterday, this morning, Ukraine confirmed dispensing with 640 Russian invaders, 37 armored personnel carriers, 37 pieces of tubed and rocket artillery combined, 15 tanks, and a number of other things, including 3 anti-aircraft systems. So Ukraine is doing very well indeed, and we're looking forward to when we're joined again by, say, Yehuda or someone similar to give us a little bit more detailed updates. Good morning, America. I see that you're waking up, a number of listeners ticking up slowly, and how very good a morning it is. Today, ladies and gentlemen, is also the day of the Ramstein meeting. The next Ramstein meeting is happening right now, and we are very excited to hear from the Ramstein meeting what exactly, in terms of additional military aid to Ukraine, the various participants there will agree. I'm sure that the U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is very highly minded to give a lot more stuff to Ukraine. Now, the U.S. has just announced in the last 24 hours or so another $675 million package, if I remember correctly. It's about 2/3 of $1 billion package of additional military aid to Ukraine, including a whole lot more HIMARS munitions. Our friend Finance Perception here says that business is booming. Booming indeed. Well, booming and then booming some more because it tends to be fairly sympathetic, the targets, that is. And we expect a whole lot more in terms of APCs, IFVs, possibly tanks going to Ukraine after this Ramstein meeting concludes as well. It is becoming increasingly clear to everyone, and I think it's very clear to everyone, that Ukraine has demonstrated significant military success with relatively limited supplies, and with some more in terms of supplies, they could demonstrate a whole lot more success still. Finance, what are the books saying?
I actually have a question for whenever we next get Yehuda up or CJ up, because I know earlier in the war, Ukraine was doing a good job acquiring, shall we say, via the tractor brigade, more tanks than they were losing. And I wondered if their speed of overrunning Russian positions was so aggressive and so quick that their net acquisition of wheeled vehicles was almost making up for, or possibly even over, their loss, because I assume they're losing some sorts of equipment doing this many offensive actions at once. So I was really curious if there was any sort of numbers on their acquisition versus loss ratio in the current offensive. I know that might be the kind of thing that OPSEC has the Ukrainians not talking about whatsoever, but if and when they are talking about it, I am absolutely fascinated to hear how that's going.
I think that's an excellent question, Finance. I don't know the answer to it. I don't think we have good statistics on that. But I can tell you that Oryx, in publishing Russian losses the last few days, has been working truly overtime. And that includes when it comes to captured equipment. I can't say that it actually outweighs it, but it certainly compensates significantly for it, especially since I think a couple of 2016 updated T-72s of the Russians were captured yesterday, the day before. I think they need a little bit of fixing. I think I saw one lost the track, but I mean that is something that the men and women back in the mechanics workshops, and this is something that should be reminded, right? Ukraine is a massively agricultural country. Ukraine has a very large agricultural sector, which is highly modern and highly mechanized. There are very many people in Ukraine who specialize in fixing tractors and combine harvesters and the like. Who can tell me what do you think they're doing now? They're still fixing some tractors, but they're also fixing other heavy equipment, such as armored personnel carriers and tanks and the like. Because if you're good at fixing really big things that go whir and harvest wheat, you're also probably pretty good at fixing very big, heavy things that go whir and smoke Russians. So there's quite a lot of investment in that respect. There's also friendly nations such as the Czech Republic and Poland and Romania who are, I believe, fixing up some of these captured pieces of Russian equipment as well, things that need a little bit more fixing up. This was publicly announced by at least one of these countries' governments some months ago as well. So yeah, absolutely. I don't know what the statistics are, but I heard that over 1,000 Russians were taken prisoner over the last week, and one would presume that quite a lot of equipment got taken with them as well. We saw some BMDs and the like taken as well. George, good morning.
Good morning. So, it's a very fine morning today, isn't it, Dolman?
It's a most excellent morning, George. Most excellent morning. And here it's already afternoon, but hey, for you it's a most excellent morning.
Yes, and for you it's a most excellent afternoon. I thought I did laugh yesterday when I saw that the Russians are asking the UN Security Council to look into Western weapons transfers to Ukraine because it affects the stability of the region. Did you hear that one, Dom?
Sorry, I missed that one. I was just laughing, and I was hoping that you'd carry on talking for a bit longer, so I get to stop laughing myself. That is hilarious in every way imaginable. I really wish that Ukraine posts a counterpoint and says that Iranian and North Korean deliveries of weapons to Russia are destabilizing the region likewise, and that they have no right in doing that. I think that is fantastic. I would also argue that Russia, being one of the larger weapons supplier to Ukraine, is also helping destabilize the region additionally, and the recommendation should be issued that Russia better get all of their equipment out of Ukraine really quick for fear that Ukraine takes it over. Because as we know, statistically, Russia is still the largest supplier of tanks. Oh no, that was the second to Poland, I think. But Russia is still the second largest supplier of new tanks to Ukraine over the last 6 months, only second to Poland. And I think that is severely destabilizing the region, and Russia should definitely get all of their tanks out of position where they could be possibly accidentally supplied to Ukraine.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. I guess someone said that there's a cultural thing in Russia is that if you're powerful enough, you can lie to somebody's face and you know you're going to get away with it. And that's some sort of like status symbol or something like that. I guess that's what they're thinking here with these goofball statements.
Yep, it's you can see Lavrov's mouth moving, and Kalantaryan's mouth moving, and you know what's coming out. And I think the same goes for whomever their permanent, whatever the name of their ambassador to the UN is as well. Unquestionably so, I would argue. There you go. Thank you, George. I hope that you heard about the. Well, let me just say this. I hope that you heard about the 640 Russians demilitarized. 15 tanks, 37 armored personnel carriers and IFVs, 32 pieces of tubed artillery, 5 pieces of rocket artillery, 3 anti-air defense systems, 2 fixed-wing aircraft, 2 rotary-wing aircraft, 3 anti-air defense systems, 1 piece of engineering technica, and believe it or not, this is all straight out of my head. I didn't even have to go and consult the published spreadsheet because it is such an exciting morning.
I was going to ask any updates on that drive toward Kupiansk.
So numbers are varied, but let's put it this way: Kupiansk is well within the range of all the tubed artillery that Ukraine possesses at this point.
That's an amazing development.
Right. The distance between Ukrainian forces and Kupiansk is now barely in double digits in kilometers, not miles, in kilometers.
Yes.
Okay, that's,
and there's really nothing between them and Kupiansk to stop them, really, except for Russian artillery, which I'm sure right now is scrambling to position themselves. To be able to hit the Ukrainian spear point, but I'm sure they're out of range of.
Russian artillery is getting decimated. Overnight, the Russian HQ at Kupiansk was hit by HIMARS. So I don't know who they have left to decide on what the Russian artillery should do. It is how it is. It is how it is. George, I'll swing back to you in a second. I'll go to Vyshnikovsky, Tom, and Mr. M, and then swing back to you, George. Vyshnikovsky, go ahead.
Hello, Doman. I just wanted to ask you if you read my message. I followed the task that you gave me of watching this Austrian interview with Kuleba.
I haven't. Let's talk more about that in a little bit, maybe, and go more in detail. How does that sound, Vyshnikovsky?
No.
Maybe you can prepare around that. I did see that you sent it. I just didn't have time to work through it.
No problem. We are now more in military domain, right?
Exactly. So once
Okay.
in maybe in 20 minutes, 15 minutes or so, we'll probably switch back to more specific things.
No problem.
And let's jump to that then. Thank you, Vyshnikovsky.
Talk
Tom,
to you later.
go ahead.
Bye.
Good afternoon, chaps. Can you hear me all right?
Loud and clear.
I can see Tim and CJ have gone, so this is probably a question to George as one of our veterans here. When you guys talk about things like companies and battalions and brigades and divisions, I know me as a non-military person, I have no idea what size and numbers of like men and vehicles and equipment these things are. So, George, if you don't mind, could you give us a quick overview of like what is the size of a company, a battalion, a brigade, that sort of thing?
Okay, so in U.S. military parlance, in U.S. speak, so you start off with a squad, right? And that's usually 8 men, and the squad is broken down into 2 teams, A team and B team, and they're usually 4-man teams. So that from the squad, you go to a platoon. Platoon's usually about 32 to 40 men, depending on whether they're armored infantry or what have you. Then from 40 men, which is a platoon, you go to a company, which is 200. And that's a company. Usually 200, they have sometimes what they call heavy companies. I don't know if they use them anymore. We use them in Desert Storm. And that's usually one of these companies that can blow up during war mobilization up to maybe 300 men, and sometimes they used to put a major in charge of them instead of a captain, but I don't know if that was just an experiment they were running. And then you go to your battalion. Your battalion is usually 1,000 to 1,200 men, and usually about 5 to 6 companies in a battalion. And then from battalion you go to your brigade level, and your brigade's usually about 5,000, 5,500 men. That's a brigade. and your division is usually 2 to 3 brigades, 12 to 15,000 men. Now, remember, when you're talking about a division and a brigade, they're not all fighting troops. You've got support elements in there too.
Thanks a lot, George. That really helps me make sense of things.
Thank you, Tom. Mr. M?
Yes, Doman, there is already some news from Ramstein. I have sent you it in the DM.
Yeah, that's the $675 million that I quoted 5-10 minutes ago. Yeah, that's already known. Oleksiy Reznikov's just a bit late to announce it himself, but that was announced overnight European time.
Okay. I thought it was.
No, it's the same just, $675 million. Yeah, that's the more high ammunition generally, and more vehicles. That's already announced. I don't think that counts as something that came out of the Ramstein meeting, because that was announced right as the Ramstein meeting was kicking off.
Okay. Then we have to nothing new.
We have to not double count these things, because this actually did come in. Now, would you like to know some new news, Mr. M? It's very good new news.
Yes, of course, I want to know news. Always good news.
About 15 minutes ago, it was announced that the U.S. Secretary of State, so the foreign minister, effectively, Anthony Blinken, has arrived in Kiev on a surprise visit. On the same day...
that I saw that, yes.
Aha, see, good. But many of our listeners haven't yet. So on the same day, as the U.S. announced $675 million in additional help to Ukraine, the same day as Ramstein 5 is taking place, and there's going to be a whole lot more, not just from the U.S., but from other countries announced in the coming days as well, the U.S. Secretary of State visits Kiev yet again. I think this is more than just a coincidence. I think this is yet another galvanization of international military and diplomatic support for our Ukrainian friends there. All of these things are just too well lined up for it to be nothing. Thermofella.
Hello, yeah, that's really good news about Blinken, actually. Shows support, probably to bolster some new push for more support, probably a little poke in the eye to Germany as well, who I don't think are allowed in Ukraine. But my question was going to be regarding the support that the US has just announced, that 600 and odd million. Is that like a grant or given equipment, or is that kind of sold equipment? And linked to
that's given. That's handed over. So the number is a bookkeeping value, right? Most of these things tend to be stuff that the US military has already had for 15, 20, 30 years. So it's whatever the bookkeeping value of that is, or sometimes even the replacement value. So sometimes the number is a bit over-exaggerated because things have their expiry dates, right? Munitions especially have their expiry dates. But yeah, it's the bookkeeping value of the stuff that they're sending. It doesn't have to be paid back or anything.
Okay, does that go for all these packages which have been announced over the months? That's all given stuff.
Yes.
Oh, brilliant! Excellent. Thanks for the answer.
Yep. No, I mean, think of it like this as well, right? What were all of these things initially created for, bought for, paid for? They were paid for to be used in case that there's a Russian invasion of Europe, right? And now they're being used for what? For fighting back the Russian invasion of Europe. There is no reason why they wouldn't be handed over. The reason why they're doing it is to, beat back the Russian invasion of Europe. That's their initial purpose in the first place. It's good that they're being used in this way. Now, Mr. M, when I said that the 675 the 675 million that was promised earlier isn't going to be the last of it.
Yes.
Secretary Blinken announced another 2 billion on top of that during his visit to Kiev.
Okay.
Yeah, see, this is what I meant. The 675 million at the start of the day was just the start of it. He's announced another 2 billion on top of this during the course of today. Secretary of State did. So that it's there's a lot. There's a lot. There's a lot coming into Ukraine for very good reason, for the best of reasons. It's Norway sending the Hellfires. America sending another $2.5 billion worth of stuff, various stuff, all good stuff. There's going to be a whole lot more being sent from other countries as well. As the day goes on, I'm sure we're going to hear more and more announcements bit by bit, right, Mr. M?
Yes, I bet they're gonna get in good use in Ukraine. So that's very good news.
И, возможно, ровно это и происходит. А во сколько они это выдержат, это большущий вопрос. Со всеми своими 25-30 ВТГ это очень большая проблема.
George?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't hear you guys. You must have been at a dead spot anyway. But Doman, what you were saying about the U.S., handing the weapons over to Ukraine because they were designed to defeat, the U.S.'s chief adversary, either / Soviet Union / Russia, whatever you want to call them now, and China. That's exactly right. And they were designed to be able to blunt, especially back in the Cold War times, all U.S. weapons, all Western weapons were designed to be technically superior to the Soviet weapons, and because they knew that the Soviets at that time had numerical superiority, but the weapons were designed to be able to take out multiple Soviet weapon systems until they were lost. And right now, the Ukrainians, remember, they're still undergunned when it comes to artillery, but they're making the most of what they have, and it's doing a great job. On the Hellfire missile, now when it's launched from a helicopter, which is the chief armament of the Apache, the Apache was designed as a tank hunter to predominantly be used at night, with its great night vision and thermal optics, and we used it to great effect during the wars in Iraq. The Hellfire has a range of about 8 kilometers. Now, I don't know about the land-based one, the ones that the Norway's.
Our Norwegian friend said up to 11. The official range is 8. One of them shot it out to 9, and that the actual range is 10 to 11.
So and that's great. That's great. That's great. The other thing is, and I'm sure they're going to have the same type of optics and thermals as obviously the American versions have, and that is just going to be some scary ass shit for the Russians, because you're going to be losing your T-72 or whatever the hell you have, T-80, from a distance of at least 8 kilometers away in the middle of the night, and you're never going to know what hit you. And that's just it's a back-breaking weapon, because it psychologically breaks the morale of anybody, if they even have any morale left, to the right or to the left of the tank that gets detonated. It's scary stuff.
Oh yeah. So these ones are the naval version, Robotsytten. The Bofors of Sweden, changed up a little bit to be more optimized to take out frigates and the like that come within range. Primarily launched from fast boats, from fast craft, not boats because it's not a submarine. But yeah, I mean, either way, I'm sure that if you want to take a tank out with it or a self-propelled howitzer, I'm sure it's gonna work just fine.
Oh, it works more than fine.
Exactly.
I would love to see the Ukrainians actually, and don't put it past them, to mount them on a couple of their helicopters.
I mean, we've never seen Western air-to-ground missiles being mounted on a Soviet airframe before, have we? Never, ever. Definitely not some self-loading pipe tobacco.
Yeah, there's nothing called the HARM missile. That's just a figment of our imagination.
Definitely. Just our imagination. Daniel.
Guess who is at Kiev now?
Sorry, say again?
Who is in Kiev at this moment?
Blinken.
Exactly. So, yeah.
I mean, the original and standard purpose of the Hellfire product, as far as I understand, is to be mounted on a helicopter, right? So it would be, the whole point to put them on a helicopter. And, that Ukrainian Air Force, which I assume includes helicopters that have been destroyed 5 times over, which would, not have them, I'm sure would find a way to use those Hellfire missiles, which they also, I'm sure, don't have, and mount them on those helicopters, which don't exist, to blow up a bunch of Russians, which certainly aren't being occupying scumbags in Ukrainian territory.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Сьогодні провів ще одне на цьому тижні засідання ставки Верховного головного.
And as a friendly listener reminds us all, giving equipment by the US also helps modernize US defense systems and generates jobs in the US because, as we know, Lockheed Martin's been hiring for the best of reasons. On top of that, it's excellent advertisement because I don't think that HIMARS and Gimlers have had a chance for, a PR coup like this really ever. And now a bunch of countries are ordering lots of HIMARS for a reason. I'm just gonna leave that there. George?
I normally don't ask specific investment questions because we do not give investment advice in this space. But since I read his investment letters, I forgot to ask our good friend Mr. Kamicki yesterday why he prefers Northrop Grumman to Lockheed Martin. When quite frankly, I do understand that you might want to invest in all defense contractors in the U.S. But when Lockheed Martin is clearly making the hottest product under the sun right now, the hottest product under the sun right now is the Russian ammo depot. But second to the Russian ammo depot, the thing that is really lighting them up, the HIMARS, is made by Lockheed Martin. And I'm really curious why he prefers Northrop to Lockheed in the current environment. I actually wanted to ask him that. But, oh well, opportunity lost. We can try next time. George, I see hands raised.
Oh, yes. I was going to ask you, Finance. I'm glad you're on here. Do we have any smokeless tobacco products?
So far, all of our tobacco products are heavily smoked by the Russians, and they certainly create large amounts of booming smoke. And I don't really know that a smokeless tobacco product would go perfectly. The latest marketing department has come up with the Hellfire filtered cigarette. So that's currently the best we've got from the marketing department. But a couple of our marketing advisors are currently sleeping in America. So when they get out, and try some of their, some of them have to get off work, we'll see if there's any other suggestions from the men and women in the marketing department about what the best way to brand this new and fantastic Hellfire product is.
I was thinking because, there's smokeless tobacco products that give you that even though, they're smokeless, so like you can smoke them in the house, you can smoke them in your ammo dump, but they give you that great hit, right? That they still give you that cigarette oomph, that big rush. And since the Hellfire missile is actually a smokeless missile that leaves no smoke trail, maybe we should develop a Hellfire smokeless tobacco product.
I mean, nature shouldn't have occupying genocidal forces either, which is why we here at the Atacams Grand Cigarette Company.
Finance, there's a host connection issue, so the space might crash. Imperious, the space might crash. If the space crashes, we'll just restart another one on the Mir report immediately. And if the space doesn't crash, then great, and we'll just keep on chatting, right? But I would just really quickly copy the title of the space just in case. Just so everybody knows, if you suddenly stop hearing all of our voices, wait 30 seconds, go to the Maria Report account, and there will be a new space up there for you to join. There are now 550 of you in this space, and we would love to see all 550 of you in the next space if the space doesn't indeed crash, so we can continue on this excellent discussion on what's going on. But the finance with that, carry on, and let's hope it doesn't actually crash.
Absolutely. I would just point out that here at the Atacams Brand Cigarette Company, we appreciate all of the smoking that Russians do and wouldn't want to slow them down. They're currently smoking at a really impressive, untold rate here in the war. 460 of them had a once-in-a-lifetime smoking experience yesterday, and that's not to mention all of the fine Russians who have graduated from our great products and are actually just going to have standard Ukrainian brand cigarettes in the care and comfort of a Ukrainian military prison here and out. Ukrainian prisons have the distinct advantage of not turning you into a fertilizer or a LADA for your family, which is something that you really can't be promised to do in Russian-occupied territory otherwise, which could be good or bad depending on your view of the Russian-occupied genocidal douchebag. But many of them appear to be taking that route as opposed to choosing the fertilizer route, as they're standing there in the middle of an open field without real good supplies, while Ukrainian forces move very quickly to surround and capture and encircle them.
Exactly. I hear that the HIMARS specifically have been very busy, has been very, very busy indeed, in taking out an HQ in Kupiansk overnight, as well as some targets around Nova Kakhovka and the like. Who was left in that HQ in Kupiansk, I wonder, not hearing Ukrainians advancing on Kupiansk. I wonder who more they managed to take out. There were some very dissatisfied, very, very dissatisfied Russian Telegram channels last night as well, calling for the head of the Western grouping of forces, I guess, Western grouping of Russian forces, who's a lieutenant general, apparently born in Volyn in Ukraine and fighting for Russia. He's apparently designated as a traitor by the Ukrainians, quite rightly so, and apparently his own brother is a colonel in the Ukrainian army. I would really, really like to see him captured like that Russian lieutenant colonel was yesterday. I do wonder what would, how that would go, and just how much the Russians would want him back. Be very exciting to see. So at 9:45 Eastern, the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Mark Milley will be holding a joint press conference at the Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany, following Ramstein 5, the fifth Ukraine Defense Contact Group meeting. So 9:45 a.m. Eastern. That's going to be in 2 hours and 45 minutes time, I think. That's about right, isn't it? 27. Yeah, there we go. And I'm sure that we're going to hear a whole lot of excellent news from the good people at the Ramstein Air Base this morning, as the meeting concludes in the afternoon. Mr. M.
Doman, guess what went boom?
I don't know. Was it Chernobylka?
No, it was a Russian ammo dump in Tomak.
In Tokmak, excellent. Now, for anybody who doesn't know, thank you very much, Mr. M. For anybody who doesn't know, Tokmak is a city
Что там реально происходит, я могу назвать. Вот вчера по результатам одного из ударов по их плацдарму на правом берегу из одного только места вывезли 3 КАМАЗа 200-х российских военных.
Это в сторону Украины?
Нет, в сторону России.
Так.
Российских военных. Это только один удар. Таких ударов за сутки штук 10. Не все, не все они по живой силе, но тем не менее можем себе представить, что там творится. Вопрос, значит, ежесуточные потери российской армии резко выросли. Сейчас они составляют 300-350 человек убитыми ежесуточно. Значительная доля их приходится на Херсонское направление. И возникает вопрос, как долго группировка, прижатая к реке, сильно проблематизированным снабжением в голой степи, сможет выдерживать такого масштаба напряжения. Возможно, не будет того, чего они так ждали, радостных забегов украинских танков и пехоты на их позиции, а будет выявили, наказали, выявили, наказали, выявили, наказали. И, возможно, ровно это и происходит. А во сколько они это выдержат, это большущий вопрос. Со всеми своими 25-30 ВТГ это очень большая проблема.
По поручению президента правительство запускает новый инструмент поддержки предприятий промышленности. Это промышленная ипотека. Соответствующее постановление подготовлено. Российские организации смогут получить долгосрочные льготные кредиты на покупку производственной недвижимости. Мы рассчитываем, что такой инструмент позволит промышленным предприятиям оптимизировать расходы на приобретение новых помещений. Ну а это, как правило, весьма затратная часть сметы. Поддержать интерес к расширению производства, запуску перспективных проектов, созданию новых рабочих мест.
Я говорю чуть-чуть по-русски, я говорю лучше по-арабски. И я знаю Ливаны, и у меня есть друзья, которые меня знают, когда делают только каре. И это очень важно.
Антон Андреевич Лиханов. Хотим выразить вам свою благодарность от ребят, добровольно подписавших контракт на защиту нашей Родины от нацистской твари. Мы очень благодарны за предоставленную нам экипировку, амуницию и все остальное. Мы честно, от души благодарны вам. И я думаю, что это все нам поможет быстро, качественно и в короткие сроки завершить нашу спецоперацию. Спасибо.
Калининград сила!
Калининград сила!
Благодарим!
来到我这儿吧，谢谢。爸爸不哭，妈妈在这儿。阿姨，坐我这吧，谢谢。哎呦。坐我这儿吧，谢谢。
you see they occupied our nuclear station. 6 blocks, the biggest in the Europe. It means 6 Chernobyls. It means the biggest danger in the Europe. So.
Ну, ще гарячим. Душок ще є. Плаваємо? Да. Навіть обшивки ніякої немає.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Сьогодні провів ще одне на цьому тижні засідання Ставки Верховного Головнокомандувача. Були присутні, як завжди, керівники сектору оборони, безпеки, Залужний, Монастирський, Буданов, Малюк, Данілов і інші. Доповідали командуючі оперативних напрямків Сирський, Літвінов, Ковальчук. Думаю, що всі ви розумієте, які основні питання прийняті і певні рішення. Я думаю, ми їх всі побачимо. Розглянули сьогодні також питання забезпечення наших військових всебічної підтримки Збройних сил України. Провів нараду щодо подальших кроків держави у європейській інтеграції. Це ще один наш оперативний напрямок роботи, щоденної важливої роботи. Для нас рух України в Євросоюз, трансформація всередині нашої країни – це те, що є одним з ключових елементів довгострокового захисту держави. Гарантію свободи для усіх українців. Тому євроінтеграційний процес
Камчатка – это особое место, это особый край. Я когда первый раз появился на Камчатке, влюбился в нее, здесь, ну, не знаю, особая атмосфера. Конечно, когда люди живут, рождаются здесь, живут здесь, то, наверное, все это считается обыденным, ко всему привыкаешь. Я, как известно, родился и вырос в Ленинграде, Петербурге, и для меня вот эти набережные города, классические виды, связанные с архитектурой 17-18 там, и поздних веков, это удивительная гармония, кстати говоря, и природы, и того, что сделал человек. Я жил с этим и считал, что так, наверное, и все живут, так и везде в мире это вот имеет место быть. Потом, когда подрос, начал ездить по стране, в основном на спортивные соревнования, понял, что это не так. И первое впечатление было такой шок. Я думал, что везде все так, как у нас в Ленинграде, в Петербурге. А нет, не так. Вот то же самое и здесь. Вот когда, видимо, человек живет, смотрит на эту красоту, кажется, что, ну, наверное, так вот везде, ну, примерно так. Нет, не так. Это уникальное место.